Chapter 378. Not everyone can send such a person. Chu Luchen looked at the few people who were looking for someone in the crowd with interest. It seemed casual, but in fact, their coordination was flawless. As soon as something happened, they immediately responded. This kind of manpower was naturally not something that just anyone could send. He didn't expect to find something here. It was a pleasant surprise. Xiao Xuanzi, Chu Luchen said to the people under the window. Although the voice was not loud, Xiao Xuanzi, who was standing downstairs, immediately heard it. He hurried upstairs and said respectfully to Chu Luchen, "Master, go find something for them to do." Chu Luchen pointed downstairs with his chin. Xiao Xuanzi glanced at the direction he pointed and saw those people. He immediately understood, "Master, I'll arrange it now." "The shopkeeper of that shop can't stay," Chu Luchen said with a smile. "This servant understands." Xiao Xuanzi nodded, glanced at Qin Wanru with a smile, and turned to go downstairs again. When he was downstairs, he had asked Yu Jie and knew that Qin Wanru had been to a bookstore before. "Coincidentally, I've been investigating that bookstore recently. I didn't expect to bump into it so soon." "What is Xiao Xuanzi going to do?" Qin Wanru looked at Xiao Xuanzi, who had gone downstairs quickly, and asked in surprise. "Since the shopkeeper has seen you and talked to you, he naturally can't stay." Chu Luchen smiled slightly and said lazily. These words made Qin Wanru feel a chill in her heart. Of course, she knew that it was the best way to do so. Although she didn't know who the shopkeeper was, it was certain that he was targeting her. It was also her wrong prediction that caused such a result. Of course, the best way was to get rid of the shopkeeper. She bit her lips and moved her fingers slightly, but she didn't say anything to stop him. She would not be soft-hearted. If the shopkeeper stayed, he would definitely see her, and he might even bring about a fatal disaster for her. Moreover, this disaster could also affect her family. "Thank you, Wang." She bit her lips and heard herself say in a low voice. "This king's people will naturally not be bullied by others. If they dare to stretch out their claws, I'll chop them off." Chu Luchen said unhurriedly, but his words were filled with endless bloodthirsty coldness. Qin Wanru nodded. She would not pity the innocent shopkeeper. If she really went to ask an ordinary miss from an aristocratic family, she would probably die here this time. Moreover, if she could not find the calligraphy and painting in her shop, her whole family might be destroyed. This was definitely not the first time he would rather kill 1,000 innocents than let a single person go. However, his methods were ruthless and he didn't want others to know. "Aren't you afraid?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows as if he was surprised by her calmness. "If I'm scared, will they let me go?" Qin Wanru shook her head, and her charming eyes were as calm as water, with almost no ripples. The ripples just now had faded away. After her rebirth, she had decided not to be soft-hearted anymore. If she couldn't even protect herself and the people she cared about, there was no need to be soft-hearted. "Of course they won't let you go. You may have stirred up a great event. Those who know this event will not let you live." Chu Luchen suddenly chuckled meaningfully. "Your Highness will not let anyone live?" Qin Wanru raised her eyes and looked at Chu Luchen. Her pair of beautiful eyes were full of Chu Liuchen's handsome figure, but this figure seemed to have a little more hostility and brutality that was rarely seen in the past. Her hands hanging on both sides were clenched tightly. Only she knew that her heart was absolutely not calm at this time. "Of course I won't let anyone live, but you." Chu Liuchen's hand touched Qin Wanru's slender neck. The teenager's hand was actually not big, but compared to Qin Wanru's slender neck, it still felt a lot bigger. His hand was placed on Qin Wanru's neck, and she could even feel the thick darkness and bloodthirsty coldness in Chu Liuchen's eyes. "You are this king's man. How could this king kill you?" His hand touched Qin Wanru's neck gently, and his smile became gentle, as if the bloodthirsty and brutality just now were all wrong. His hand slid up again, fell on the top of her hair, and gently rubbed it, reminding her, "Shuozhua, look outside." Qin Wanru's head turned to the outside, and all the blood in her body slowly flowed back to her heart. Even so, she felt weak and relaxed because of the tension just now. Chu Liuchen's hand fell from the top of her hair to her shoulder, and gently supported her. His movement was elegant, without a trace of anger. Qin Wanru's attention turned to the outside of the window, and there was a chaos outside. Someone was shouting, "Murder! Assassins! Someone come quickly!" The screams suddenly rose, and the pedestrians on the street were scared to run. The place where the sound came from, some people rushed over, and they were the few people who squeezed in the crowd to find someone. And the place where the accident happened was that shop. Something happened in that shop? Biting her lips, Qin Wanru heard her calm voice. "Is the shopkeeper dead?" Chu Luchen said with certainty, and there was a trace of gorgeous coldness in his light smile, like a sharp unsheathed blade, lightly and sharply cutting the sharpest place of others. "Do you want to go and have a look?" "Can I?" Qin Wanru turned back. "Of course not. If you go down now, I'm afraid that someone will recognize you. After all, more than one shopkeeper saw you, right?" Chu Luchen laughed, as if he was amused by Qin Wanru's naivety. His words made Qin Wanru silent for a while. When she was there, more than one shopkeeper saw her. She suddenly thought of something. "Is it that shopkeeper? It's not good to keep that place, so just get rid of it." Chu Liuchen's smile became more and more gentle, and his eyes fell on the street entrance downstairs. Qin Wanru turned her head again, and found that the place was actually burning, and the fire was soaring. Some people were calling for help, some were putting out the fire, and some were running away. It was a mess. There was more than one person who died. Qin Wanru's eyesight was not bad, and she saw several people who had looked for her dead on the spot. This was the first time since she was reborn that she saw someone die in front of her like this, and it was because of her. Her cold fingers trembled, and she suddenly felt that her hand touched something warm and soft. She subconsciously looked down and saw Chu Liuchen's hand holding hers. His hand was warm this time. He held her cold little hand and exerted a little force. "Are you afraid?" Chu Luchen suddenly asked with a faint smile. "No." Qin Wanru raised her head and shook her head decisively. She looked directly at Chu Liuchen's handsome face, which was like a young immortal coming out of an ink landscape painting, and there was a little coldness and hostility in her cold eyes. This situation was originally a life-or-death situation. Either they died, or she was in trouble. She would not think that others would be kind enough to let her go. If Chu Luchen did not appear, she would be in trouble, and she might even be doomed eternally. "That's good. Sit down, I have something to tell you." Chu Luchen laughed and took her hand to the table, and they sat down again. "Prince, what's the matter?" Qin Wanru asked. "Mingqiu Nun has entered the capital city." Chu Luchen looked at her with a smile. "Where?" Qin Wanru was so excited that she put her hands on the table and was about to sit up. She looked straight at Chu Luchen, full of joy. Counting the days, Mingqiu Nun should have entered the capital city, but she had not heard from Mingqiu Nun until now. She originally wanted to find a chance to ask Chu Luchen. She went to the palace to see Imperial grandmother, and she was very satisfied. Chu Luchen said with some meaning. Qin Wanru was stunned, and she blinked her watery eyes. She hesitated and asked, "Is Mingqiu Nun living in the palace now?" "Temporarily in the palace." Chu Luchen said. "How can I see Mingqiu Nun?" Qin Wanru said helplessly. The palace was not other places, and not everyone could see it if they wanted to. Even though Empress Dowager said that she could enter the palace at any time, and she had the token given by Chu Luchen, Qin Wanru did not dare to act rashly. "In a few days, when I return to the mansion, I will bring Mingqiu Nun back. Mingqiu Nun's medical skills are good, and my health is much better." Chu Luchen glanced at her, picked up the wine pot on the table, poured a cup for himself, and slowly took a sip. "Prince, you'd better drink less." Qin Wanru looked at Chu Luchen with a disapproving look. "My health is good," Chu Luchen said very casually, looking at her with a very meaningful smile. His words seemed to be true, and Qin Wanru felt that she almost believed it. "Prince, you'd better take care of yourself. Even if Mingqiu Nun is here, she will definitely say so to you." Qin Wanru said implicitly. She was sincerely persuading Chu Luchen. It was also because Chu Luchen saved her, and for her own life, she also had to thank Chu Luchen. "Do you want to control me?" Chu Luchen said with a smile, and the smile on his handsome face became more and more gentle. Qin Wanru even felt that this smile could be regarded as gentle. I dare not. In fact, it is not impossible. Chu Liuchen's fingers gently tapped on the table. Anyway, you will enter my Prince Chen's mansion in the future, so it is reasonable to control you first. His words were so natural, and Qin Wanru's face immediately turned red. How could he control this kind of thing first? Moreover, her so-called entering Prince Chen's mansion was also a plan. When Prince Chen liked another beauty, she would naturally abdicate, and why should she control him? Your Highness, this minister's daughter does not dare. She repeated herself. Chapter 379. Gift. Qin Wanru raised her eyes suspiciously and looked at Chu Luchen with a pair of bright watery eyes. She moved her hands a few times but found that she couldn't move at all. Of course I want a gift. I have given you a red packet for the new year. Chu Luchen looked at Qin Wanru up and down. This made Qin Wanru a little nervous for no reason. She subconsciously widened her watery eyes and looked at Chu Luchen nervously with a pair of somewhat enshrouded eyes. This kind of vigilance pleased Chu Luchen. He reached out and plucked Qin Wanru's earring. An earring fell into his hand, and then his hand fell from Qin Wanru's hand. This earring is a gift for me. Qin Wanru withdrew her hand and looked at Chu Luchen speechlessly. Look at my red packet. Chu Luchen said with a young man's pride. Qin Wanru lowered her head and opened her palm. When she saw that there was really a red packet in her palm, a big one, she didn't know what to say. She pinched the red packet into a thick stack. When she opened the red packet, she saw that it was full of bank notes. The top one was a small one of 10 taels, and then there were bank notes of 20, 50, and 100 taels. Such a stack was estimated to be about 10,000 taels. It was the first time for Qin Wanru to see so many bank notes. She was stunned and drew back her head. Child. Qin Wanru bit her lips and blinked her watery eyes. She didn't understand what he meant. Even if he gave her a red packet, it was too big. Chu Luchen didn't seem to be surprised by her shock. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. This is a red packet and also a betrothal gift from me. You are my woman, so you can't be shabby during the new year. I don't want it. It's too much. Qin Wanru bit her lips and reached out to take the top one of the 10 taels banknotes. She pushed the rest to Chu Luchen and said, Child, thank you for the red packet. What, don't you like it? Chu Luchen was smiling, but there was some unknown meaning at the bottom of his eyes. Don't you want my betrothal gift? The so-called betrothal gift was naturally what Qin Wanru had promised before. The red envelope could be declined, but the betrothal gift could not be declined. It was just that this explanation was hard to accept. The so-called betrothal gift was obviously carried into the mansion in front of everyone. Who would give it in private? However, when Prince Chen did it, people felt that it was a matter of course. Prince, this is too much. Qin Wanru said helplessly. Even if it was a betrothal gift, it would only be a few thousand taels of silver. Who would give so much at once? How can this king's people be wronged? Chu Luchen elegantly brushed his sleeves and said. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and said, Are you looking down on my betrothal gift? Would she dare to look down on him? Qin Wanru was speechless. The prince was so dedicated to his work. He just wanted to be a shield, but he actually did a whole set. Seeing Qin Wanru accept the banknote, Chu Liuchen's smile became more and more charming. When he raised his hand and was about to say something, they suddenly heard someone coming up the stairs quickly. They looked at the stairs together. It was Xiao Xuanzi who came up. He went upstairs and bowed to Chu Luchen first. Then he came over and whispered in Chu Liuchen's ear. Chu Liuchen's eyes immediately became a little deeper. Where is he? He is downstairs. Prince, would you like to have a look? Xiao Xuanzi said with uncertainty. Since he guessed that I am here, let him come up. Chu Luchen smiled. His smile was as gentle as jade. It seemed that what he heard now was originally in his plan. What about second miss? Xiao Xuanzi looked at Qin Wanru and was a little anxious. There was only such a small space upstairs, and there were no other rooms. There was only one staircase to go downstairs. At this time, the person had arrived downstairs. Even if she wanted to go downstairs, it was too late. Just upstairs. Bring my cloak up, Chu Luchun said. Yes, I will get it right away, Xiao Xuanzi answered hurriedly. He hurriedly ran downstairs. After a while, he came up with a white fox cloak and presented it to Chu Luchun respectfully. There was a circle of light gray fur on the edge of the gorgeous cloak, which made this extremely gorgeous cloak look very graceful and elegant. At first glance, Chu Luchun knew it was very valuable. Chu Luchun took it, walked to Qin Wanru's side, pulled her up, and then covered Qin Wanru with the cloak. The cloak was wide, and Qin Wanru was small, so she was covered in it. She was wrapped in the smooth and soft fox fur, which was very comfortable. After that, Qin Wanru felt that her slender waist was held. After being taken for a few steps, she sat down and moved a little. She didn't know where she was sitting. She only felt that there was something soft under her legs. It was not only the chair. Suddenly, she heard Chu Luchun's light voice, and a hand hugged her slender waist tightly. Don't move, someone is coming. His words scared Qin Wanru and she immediately quieted down. Although she couldn't see through the cloak, she still felt that her face was burning, and only felt that the blood in her body rushed to her face. She simply buried her whole body in the fox fur and didn't move. Sensing that Qin Wanru seemed to be pretending to be dead, Chu Luchun smiled happily. He reached out and let her head lean on his shoulder, and then put his hand on her slender waist, nodding to Xiao Xuanzi beside him. Xiao Xuanzi went down, and this time he brought up a young eunuch. He was immediately stunned when he saw Chu Luchun sitting there with a woman wrapped tightly in his arms. The cloak was very big, but he could still see the top of the woman's head. It was a petite woman who was wrapped up and held in his arms. Chu Luchun was just a teenager, and he was not tall enough. The person who could be held in his arms and seemed to lean on his shoulder could only be a petite woman. How could Chu Luchun hold a woman? Who was this woman? It was not said that Prince Chen didn't like women. The palace maid sent by the Empress Dowager and the Empress didn't even survive. Then who was this woman who was held in his arms tightly and protected by him? The young eunuch was so surprised that he forgot his etiquette and stared at Chu Luchun in front of him. He had imagined countless scenes of seeing Prince Chen, but he had never thought of such a scene. It was so shocking, almost as shocking as the scene of being assassinated today. Shichi, what's wrong with uncle? Chu Luchun casually reached out a hand to fix Qin Wanru's hair, which was messed up by the cloak, and asked gently, as if he didn't know that no one would be able to calm down in this situation. Greetings, Your Highness. Shichi finally came to his senses, hurriedly suppressed the shock in his heart, and stepped forward to salute. Chu Luchun narrowed his eyes, and there was a bit of coldness in his handsome eyes. Uncle is not on the mountain to worship Buddha. Is it possible that he has come down the mountain? Your Highness, our prince rarely comes down the mountain on the eve of the spring festival. I didn't expect that he would be assassinated. I heard that Prince Chen is here, so I come to ask for help. Ask for help? Chu Luchun said casually, and he was not surprised that his whereabouts were discovered at all. Our prince just entered a bookstore and wanted to find some books to read. But someone suddenly rushed out and assassinated our prince. Our prince hid in the bookstore, but the bookstore was also on fire. Our prince was injured and escaped. When he saw the guards standing at the door of this bookstore, he knew that Prince Chen is here. Uncle wants to come in and have a rest. Chu Luchun asked unhurriedly. Uncle? Who is uncle? Qin Wanru was in Chu Luchun's arms, but her brain was spinning rapidly. For a moment, she couldn't remember who this so-called uncle was. In the darkness, she opened a pair of bright watery eyes and listened to them more quietly. Our prince doesn't dare to disturb Prince Chen's rest. If he disturbs Prince Chen, I'm afraid that he can't bear the responsibility. He just wants to borrow 2 guards to send our prince. Shichi said respectfully, but his eyes couldn't help falling on Qin Wanru again and again. Who was this woman who was wrapped up without a head and brain? Why had he never heard of her? If this matter was publicized, it would shock the Imperial court and the public. Could Your Highness make use of this? Because he focused on Qin Wanru, the speech that he had prepared seemed a little dry. Disturb me? Chu Luchun suddenly smiled and his eyes flickered. I only brought 2 guards and I can lend them to uncle, But if I also, Shichi was shocked and didn't dare to look at Qin Wanru anymore. He hurriedly said, "Don't worry, Prince Qin. Our prince is in the yard next to you. You only need to ask the 2 guards to pay more attention to our prince. You don't need 2 guards to guard our prince. This matter has been reported to the Imperial Palace, and someone from the Imperial Palace will come later." If something happened to Prince Qin, not only Shichi couldn't bear the responsibility, but also his master couldn't bear it. It was said that after Prince Qin had an accident, several princes were seriously injured. If it was all true, probably no one would believe it. It was just an accident because they were afraid to bear the responsibility. But even so, several princes were seriously injured and had to stay in the Imperial Institute of Medicine. It could be seen that no one dared to bear the responsibility, and no one could bear it. In this case, it doesn't matter. You go back first and report to your prince that I will ask 2 guards to take care of Uncle and never let the bad guys hurt Uncle again. As for what you saw today, Chu Luchan reached out and gently touched Qin Wanru's head. Then he put one hand into the cloak and pulled out a thin white hand. "Don't worry, Prince Qin. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything." Shichi didn't dare to look more, and hurriedly looked down at the ground in front of him. He was so nervous that his face was slightly pale. Prince Qin was the most temperamental. This matter was nothing in the eyes of others, but if His Highness wanted to kill him, it was really not a big deal. Even if he was the personal servant of his master, it was not a big deal. Shichi had served his prince for more than 10 years, and he couldn't be compared with ordinary little eunuchs. He knew what to say at this time. "Go. Take good care of Uncle Wang. Next time I go to see Uncle Wang, I will discuss Dharma with him." Chu Luchan waved his hand slowly and said, "Yes, yes, yes, I know." Shichi was sweating and felt that he had survived a disaster. He didn't dare to look more and hurriedly went downstairs. Chapter 380. The scream of pain came from behind. It was a woman's voice. It was very light and soft. Even if he didn't see her, he would think that the woman was a very beautiful person. Even if he was curious, Shichi didn't dare to look at her. He walked faster and faster, for fear that if he walked slowly, he would provoke this man again. His master had warned him time and time again not to provoke this man. This time he had no choice. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used this man as a cover. Qin Wanru touched her head. She was in so much pain that her tears fell down. She didn't know what hard thing she hit, and now she still saw darkness in front of her. The cloak on her head was suddenly lifted. Chu Liuchen's handsome and narrow eyes were as gloomy as water. She saw his slender and white hand covering his chin. Qin Wanru immediately came to her senses. She hurriedly smiled and reached out to rub the top of her head. "Prince, who is your uncle?" Another hand fell from the top of her head. After rubbing her head gently twice, he looked at her with disgust. "Let Xiao Xuanzi take you to leave from the back door." As he said, another hand fell from his chin and put on Qin Wanru's slender waist. The warm touch on her waist immediately made Qin Wanru wake up. She hurriedly stood up, and the cloak slipped to one side. "Second miss, please." Xiao Xuanzi came over at the stairway, bowed his head and said, "Put on this dress. Don't let others find you." Chu Luchan stood up and put the cloak in his hand on Qin Wanru. This time, he didn't put it on casually. After putting the 2 belts in place, he helped her put down the hat on her head. From the outside, they could only vaguely see that she was a woman, and other things couldn't be seen clearly. Qin Wanru understood that there would be guards from the palace coming to ask questions later. It was very inappropriate for her to stay here because it would be easy to be found out. Following Xiao Xuanzi downstairs, Yujie was already waiting at the stairway. She was also wearing a gray cloak outside, which covered her clothes and face tightly. An ordinary carriage had been parked at the back door. Xiao Xuanzi arranged for them to get on the carriage. After that, the carriage turned all the way out of the alley and went to another bustling street. Then it turned out of the street, past a narrow alley, and turned to the main street. It turned several corners along the way and finally stopped in a secluded alley. "Miss, please get off the carriage," the coachman said in a low voice after stopping the carriage. Yujie jumped off the carriage first, followed by Qin Wanru. "Miss, leave the cloak behind." The coachman reminded them. After Yujia put their cloaks back on the carriage, the coachman pointed to the street in front of them and said, "Go out from here and walk for a while. You'll see the street where the bookstore was on fire." This meant that they could go back to the original path. Qin Wanru nodded and stepped aside with Yujia. The carriage moved forward again and continued to move forward. Qin Wanru took Yujia out of the alley and stood on the street. There were still a lot of people on this part of the street, but they didn't swarm forward. Instead, they gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and talked about something. Qin Wanru walked over with Yujia and found that they were talking about the bookstore fire. She couldn't help but stop. Why is there an assassin in that bookstore? Will the assassin assassinate the shopkeeper of an ordinary bookstore? There is a noble in the bookstore. I heard that he is a prince. Are you serious? Is there anything wrong with this prince? What if something really happens to him? Someone was worried. Royal bloodline? If something really happened, the person who was involved would be in big trouble. I don't know. I hope he is okay. It's just a small bookstore. It's nothing if it's burned down. She didn't know whether she was comforting herself or others. Qin Wanru rolled her watery eyes. When she was upstairs just now, she had actually figured out the identity of the prince. Prince Cheng who loved Buddhism and was the younger brother of the current emperor. It was said that Prince Cheng loved Buddhism and had liked it since he was a child. He even had the idea of becoming a monk. If Empress Dowager and the emperor hadn't suppressed him, he might have become a monk long ago. He didn't suffer any blow. He just loved Buddhism. Because of his love, he wanted to become a monk. He didn't marry until he was old. In fact, he and the emperor were not brothers born from the same mother. However, his mother died early and he was raised by Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager also liked him very much. Naturally, she wouldn't allow him to become a monk. Under the pressure, Prince Cheng seldom lived in his prince's mansion. Basically, he lived in those famous temples in the mountains. Occasionally, he would go to the palace to see Empress Dowager when he went down the mountain. In Qin Wanru's opinion, this prince was the most indifferent one. He even faded out of people's eyes. People would only think that the emperor's sons would fight for the throne, but they didn't think that this brother of the emperor was also an ambitious person. He just covered up everything with his usual performance. In her previous life, when Qin Wanru was cut in half at the waist, Prince Cheng was still a prince with excellent Buddhism. When he heard that his elder brother had an accident, he hurried to the palace to take care of him. Qin Wanru spent a lot of time in the palace in her previous life, but she didn't have much contact with Prince Cheng. However, she secretly saw something related to Prince Cheng. Therefore, she knew that Prince Cheng was not as indifferent as he looked. On that day, she passed by a secluded palace. She couldn't remember what she was going to do, but she seemed to have something to do there. There, she saw 2 eunuchs talking secretly, and one gave something to the other. She was shocked by their conversation. One of the 2 eunuchs was Prince Cheng's servant, and the other was the emperor's confidant eunuch. The eunuch of Prince Cheng gave the emperor's confidant eunuch a package and asked him to put it on the emperor's meal. It seemed that the eunuch mentioned Chu Luchan, who was the crown prince at that time. However, they were far away from each other, so their conversation was intermittent. Qin Wanru couldn't hear it clearly. But if there was really nothing wrong, why not take out the package and give it to the emperor directly? Seeing the 2 eunuchs acting sneakily, Qin Wanru didn't dare to move at that time, for fear of being discovered by them. If the 2 eunuchs knew that there was someone in the dark, they would kill her. Although this thing in the last life caused her a lot of confusion and panic at that time, in the end she had an accident, but nothing happened to the emperor. Prince Cheng was still a prince who loved Buddhism and was very particular about brotherhood. For such a prince who wanted to be a monk, even though the royal family had never trusted the brotherhood, they were not wary of him. Sister Wanru. A voice came to her ears. Qin Wanru looked back in surprise and saw Qi Tianyu standing behind her with a surprised face. Seeing her turn her head, he found that he didn't recognize the wrong person and immediately showed a smile on his face. Was this his sincere joy for finding her? This feeling was so strange. Qin Wanru frowned slightly and looked at Qi Tianyu. She always felt that there was something she didn't know. Master, he is coming. Xiao Xuanzi went upstairs and reported. Come here. Chu Chunlu waved lazily. Chu Luchun waved his hand lazily downstairs and said. Xiao Xuanzi nodded. After a while, there was a sound of stairs and a guard leader came down. When he saw Chu Luchun, he hurriedly went forward to salute and said respectfully, Your Highness. Excuse me, Chu Luchun said casually. He raised his drunken red face and closed his eyes. It could be seen that he was a little drunk. Your Highness, I am investigating the assassination of Prince Qing by the Emperor's order. The guard leader stood up and said. Is Uncle okay? Chu Luchun reached out to touch his head and asked lazily. Prince Qing is fine. He is just frightened. The guard leader said and frowned secretly. If this matter couldn't be found out, it would be another accident and he might not be able to explain to the emperor. Previously, several princes had met with accidents one after another, which had made people tense up for fear that there would be any trouble. Now, even Prince Cheng, who was the most quiet and inactive, had met with an accident. Someone must be plotting something in secret. Plotting what? Needless to say, the guard leader was under a lot of pressure. Since he is just frightened, it's not a big deal. I am also frightened. Chu Luchun said casually, Should I go back to the palace or the mansion at this time? This question was too direct. The guard leader smiled bitterly and said tactfully, Your Highness, Empress Dowager and the Emperor are worried about your safety. Please go back to the palace first. Such a thing had happened, and Prince Chen was involved in the center of the matter. Even though everyone thought that Prince Chen was completely unlucky to be involved in it, they had to ask. The head of the guards was also very influential. He really didn't dare to ask Prince Chen casually, so he could only say in a roundabout way that it was the most appropriate for the emperor to ask him after entering the palace. As for other things, he didn't dare to get involved. Having been in the palace for so long, the guard leader certainly knew the importance of Prince Chen. Prince Chen would be fine if Prince Chen was involved in something that happened to Prince Cheng. But if Prince Chen was involved in something that happened to Prince Cheng, it would be a big deal. Should he feel lucky that it was Prince Cheng who had an accident instead of Prince Chen who had a more noble status? Until now, the guard leader still didn't know why this extremely sick and weak Prince Chen was involved in it. Therefore, it was more difficult to find out. Uncle, don't you go back to the palace with me? Chu Luchun said with a gentle smile. Although his voice was gentle, it carried a kind of dignity that couldn't be ignored. The guard leader didn't dare to refuse to answer. Your Highness, Prince Cheng, will naturally enter the palace. That's good. I happened to think of this house and wanted to enjoy the scenery here, but I don't know why you came to my yard. I don't know when I became your neighbor. Chu Luchun stood up, raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. His face became more and more gentle and elegant. His words made the guard leader's face change greatly. His hand unconsciously hit on his sword, making a clear, clang sound. Chu Liuchun's eyes fell on the guard leader's sword and his face suddenly became cold. Chapter 381. The crime of assassinating Prince Chen will be exterminated. Xiao Xuanzi screamed in a gloomy voice and stood in front of Chu Luchun. Your Highness, I dare not. I really did it by accident. The commander's face turned pale and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He threw away the sword in his hand and then knelt down to kowtow. The room suddenly became quiet, which was extremely weird. The commander of the guards could even see the sweat on his forehead rolling down from his eyelashes, and his heart was in his throat. After a long while, he heard Chu Liuchun's gentle voice. You didn't try to assassinate me just now? I dare not. I dare not do such an unfilial thing even if I have to die. The commander did not dare to raise his head. Get up. Chu Liuchun's voice seemed to be gentle. But the commander did not dare to relax a bit. He still knelt down and said, Thank you, Your Highness. I still have something to report. Say it. Chu Luchun picked up the tea on the table and took a sip leisurely. The tense atmosphere in the room just now disappeared because of his calmness. This feeling even made the guard commander wonder if the scene from before was just a figment of his imagination. But he immediately denied this feeling from the bottom of his heart. There were still drops of sweat on the ground in front of him, which told him how amazing the momentum of Prince Qin in front of him was just now. He was much more imposing than Prince Cheng. Prince Cheng asked about you just now and deliberately said that he saw you temporarily resting in the yard next to him. He did not have a residence next to your yard as your highness thought. The commander carefully reported. He did not want to say this at first, but now he had to take it out to please Prince Chen in front of him. Uncle unexpectedly found me by chance, but I only went out of the palace once by chance. This fate is really not shallow. Chu Luchen said lightly. The commander suddenly felt that the sweat on his forehead began to roll down again. He only came to investigate the person who assassinated Prince Cheng, but now he felt that he seemed to have heard something he should not have heard. It was really a coincidence, as if two people who should not have met inexplicably. This was also an important reason why he specially came to see Prince Chen. Prince Cheng was assassinated, and this Prince Chen happened to appear in the area where Prince Cheng was assassinated. No matter how one looked at it, he was suspicious. Just now, Prince Cheng repeatedly said that he was lucky to meet Prince Chen, so he could be safe. Of course, this meant that Prince Chen had a lot of people, but it also meant that it was very suspicious for Prince Chen to appear here. But now Prince Chen's words were contrary to the previous meaning. It was King Cheng who deliberately set the trap. These were clearly the two princes who were the least likely to get into trouble. How did they end up together? Does my uncle know about this? The guard commander was speechless for a while, but Chu Luchen became more relaxed and asked leisurely. His Majesty already knows about this matter and is furious. The commander of the Imperial bodyguards replied. Ask my uncle to investigate this matter more. We have to tell my uncle the truth. Who is so powerful that he even knows when my uncle will go down the mountain and even calculates that I will also be here tonight. Chu Luchen coughed in a low voice and did not say anything. You can leave now. My master is not in good health and will go back to the palace soon. Xiao Xuanzi said to the guard commander coldly. Yes, I will leave now. The guard commander hurriedly stood up and retreated to the side. Chu Luchen slightly closed his handsome eyes and waved his hand. The guard commander did not dare to stay any longer and hurriedly went downstairs. Sir, how is your health? Xiao Xuanzi looked at his master's pale face in fear. At this time, the blush caused by drinking had faded, and the usual paleness appeared on his face. It could be seen that Chu Luchen was not in a good condition at this time. Go back to the palace. Chu Luchen said with his eyes closed. Yes, I will go to prepare now. Seeing that his breath was stable, Xiao Xuanzi breathed a sigh of relief. Prepare the bed. Chu Luchen said casually. Xiao Xuanzi stopped and hurriedly said, Yes, I will go to find the bed right now. 2 guards were found and they were Chu Liuchen's own guards. After coming up, they brought a soft bed. Xiao Xuanzi helped Chu Luchen lie on the bed and covered him with a thin quilt. Then he asked the 2 guards to carefully carry the soft bed downstairs. How is Prince Chen? When they went out of the courtyard, the door was brightly lit and a handsome young man was standing in the small courtyard beside it. Seeing the guards carrying Chu Luchen down, his face changed greatly and he hurriedly strode over. Although his clothes were plain and simple, it could be seen from his steps that he was not an ordinary person. Greetings, Your Highness. Xiao Xuanzi screamed. How is your master? Looking at Chu Luchen, whose face was as pale as snow, Prince Cheng asked anxiously. He was frightened. I am afraid that he is not very good. Xiao Xuanzi's eyes turned red and tears were about to fall down. Looking at the beautiful young man covered in the quilt, his face was indeed as pale as snow, without a trace of blood. Send him to the palace, hurry up. Prince Cheng ordered and got out of the way. After Xiao Xuanzi bowed to him, he hurriedly followed the soft bed and walked out of the alley. The alley was too small, so the carriage was parked outside. Behind them, Prince Cheng thoughtfully looked at the departing crowd with a knot between his eyebrows. Your Highness. Shichi stepped forward and whispered. Let's also go to the palace. Prince Cheng frowned and said, Prince Chen is not in good health. I am afraid that he was frightened just now. If I had known that he was in such poor health, I would not have sent someone to disturb him just now. Shichi was stunned and did not understand his master's meaning. He secretly glanced at Prince Cheng in astonishment. Prince Cheng meant to drag Prince Chen into trouble and even use Prince Chen's position in the emperor's mind to solve his doubts. Why did he seem to be wholeheartedly protecting Prince Chen in such a short time? Let's go to the palace. Prince Cheng seemed not to see the entangled expression on his confidant's face and just said calmly, "Your Highness, please get on the carriage." Shichi said respectfully. They went out just now and were also going to get on the carriage. They did not expect that Chu Luchen also went out and happened to bump into him. "Your Highness, do you want to go to the palace first?" The guard commander stepped forward and asked. "First go to the palace to report to my brother and then check on Prince Chen's health. He is still in such poor health that Empress Dowager and the Emperor are very worried." Prince Cheng sighed and said helplessly. As an elder who cared about the younger generation, it was natural for him to make such a decision. After Prince Cheng finished speaking, he got on the carriage and the carriage slowly went all the way to the palace. In front of their carriage was Chu Liuchen's carriage, which was rushing to the palace. With a patient in the carriage, it could not be slow. There were so many people on the street that it was not easy to find someone. Qin Wanru was surprised to see Qi Tianyu and then Qi Baiyu, but she did not see Qin Yuru. The entrance of the bookstore had been cordoned off and people could not walk on that section of the road. But the surrounding roads had been restored to peace and it was still bustling on the eve of the Spring Festival. Although people who saw the scene were very flustered, there were more people who did not see it. When they talked about it, they only thought it was a small accident. The street became lively again. People who should laugh still laughed, and people who should make noise still made noise. After Qin Wanru and the Qi brothers searched for Qin Yuru again and again, they had no choice but to turn back. They had to report this to Qin Huaiyong and ask him to send someone to find Qin Yuru. But when they walked to Qin's mansion, they unexpectedly met Qin Yuru. "Second sister, where have you been? I looked for you in many places but I couldn't find you." Qin Yuru looked very anxious. She rushed out of a street and grabbed Qin Wanru's hand, looking excited and nervous. Nervous? Qin Wanru's watery eyes glanced over the street. There were several small alleys over there and two women stepped back. Looking at their clothes, they should be servant girls. Two servant girls sent them out. It was really a big show. "Where did big sister go? The two childs Qi and I looked for you for a long time, but we didn't see you." Qin Wanru said calmly and reached out to pull Qin Yuru's hand away. She might need to pretend in front of others, but in front of the Qi brothers, Qin Wanru really felt that it was unnecessary. Others might not know what happened in Jiangzhou, but how could the Qi brothers not know? "I was also looking for you. Maybe we took a wrong turn." Qin Yuru rolled her eyes and smiled. "Big sister has been here all the time?" Qin Wanru looked around and asked. "How could it be? I just got here. Let's go, it's so late. We'd better go home early. Father and grandmother must be anxious." Qin Yuru said and hurried to leave this place. The more anxious she was, the less anxious Qin Wanru was. She walked a few steps and changed a place, then said slowly, "Big sister, do you know what happened on the street just now? Many people died." "What happened?" Qin Yuru asked subconsciously. Qi Tianyu looked up at her, and a trace of sadness flashed in his eyes, but he did not say anything. "It seems that someone killed a lot of people and it was on fire. The fire rushed to the street. We happened to be in that area, and I couldn't find anyone else, so I hid in a shop." "Where did you hide, big sister? Did you see it?" Qin Wanru said calmly. "Yeah, of course I saw it. How could I not see such a big fire? I also hid in a shop, but in a panic I didn't see clearly which shop it was. Later, I was surrounded by people, and then in order to find you, I couldn't even find the way. Now I was wandering around here, and then I saw second sister. It's really great." Qin Yuru said with an anxious face, as if she had been looking for Qin Wanru for a long time. But there were too many deliberate words, as if there was no trace left, which made people feel that what she said was not true. Moreover, with her character, how could she really care about Qin Wanru's life and death? It was good enough that she didn't want Qin Wanru to die, so how could she care about Qin Wanru? What she said was false. Not only did Qin Wanru have such a thought, but the Qi brothers also had the same thought. Although they did not speak, their eyes fell on Qin Yuru, and Qin Yuru's expression became stiff and awkward. Chapter 382. The fire was not big just now. Qi Tianyu suddenly said, maybe I was wrong. I only heard people outside saying that there was a fire. Qin Yuru reacted quickly and said, let's go, let's go. It's been such a long time. If we don't go back now, Uncle will be impatient. Qi Baiyu looked at them and said impatiently. The figure in the deep alley did not move. It was much darker than outside and they could not see clearly. It seemed that the person over there was very interested in them and just quietly watched them. Let's go. Qin Wanru nodded. They went to Qin's mansion. When they arrived at the gate of Qin's mansion, they saw Nanny Duan guarding at the gate. Seeing them coming, Nanny Duan hurriedly came to them and said, First miss, second miss, you're finally back. If you didn't come back, old grandma would come to find you in person. What happened? Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked. It said that something happened on the street outside. There was a fire and someone died. General has gone out. Old grandma and Madame Shui are very worried, but it is not convenient for them to go out to find you. So they asked me to wait at the gate. Nanny Duan wiped the sweat on her forehead and said, it was the first time for them to come to the capital city and they were not familiar with the people and the place. Although they were protected by the two Qi masters, it would not be easy to find them if they were accidentally separated. Old grandma regretted it and said that she should not have let them go out of the mansion. Father is not in the mansion? Qin Yuru's eyes flashed and she asked. Yes, a guard came and asked General to leave. He said that there was an accident. Nanny Duan was not very clear about it. It was Qin Huaiyong who asked someone to inform old grandma about it before he left. Prince Cheng was assassinated and someone died on the street. Even his house was burned. Father was in charge of public security, so of course he had something to do with it. First miss, second miss, it's late. We should go back. Qi Tianyu and Qi Baiyu stood at the gate and said goodbye. Since you two have come together, please stay for supper. You must be tired after walking for so long, right? Madame Shui has already asked someone to prepare supper in the flower hall at the gate. It's very close. Nanny Duan was relieved to see that Qin Yuru and Qin Wanru were fine. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and pointed to a room at the door. This place was close, so it wouldn't take up too much time to go back. Big brother, let's have supper before we leave. We've been walking for such a long time and I'm really hungry. Qi Baiyu said shamelessly. He was young, and he was familiar with the Qin sisters, so he didn't think he had crossed the line. Qi Tianyu looked a little hesitant. Brother Tianyu, why don't you come in and have some with us? You can go back after you're done. Even if you're going to study, it doesn't matter. Second sister and I will go back to rest after we're done. Qin Yuru said. The four of them grew up together and they used to call each other like this. Therefore, it was not impolite for Qin Yuru to call him Brother Tianyu. But with the two of them acting like this, it inexplicably made people feel that they were a little too close. The relationship between the two families was strained because of the relationship between the two of them, but she could still call him so naturally at this time. Thank you, Nanny Duan. Qi Tianyu said politely. You're welcome. Nanny Duan said with a smile and led them into the mansion. The lights in the flower hall had been lit, and there were a few plates of pastries on the table. The tea had also been served, and some servant girls went down to serve them. Nanny Duan went into the inner courtyard to tell old grandma and Shui Ruolin that they were safe. They were sitting in the flower hall, and they came down from the kitchen on the street. Qi Baiyu, who was hungry, had eaten a few pieces of pastries in a hurry. At this time, he seemed to have recovered. Qin Wanru, where did you go? Why did you disappear all of a sudden? Qi Baiyu only had time to talk when he was half full. I was following behind you, but I couldn't see you in a blink of an eye. Then I walked in the direction you were going. Qin Wanru also ate the piece of pastry. At this time, she took a handkerchief and slowly wiped the pastry crumbs on her hands, and said slowly, Second sister, we were so close at that time. How could you not see us in a blink of an eye? Qin Yuru stared at Qin Wanru and asked, I don't know why I couldn't see you in a blink of an eye. Maybe it's because I'm a little short. Qin Wanru answered casually. If this reason was said by others, it would be insufficient. However, when Qin Wanru said this, people immediately saw her thin and weak body. Although she was a little taller, she was still not as tall as Qin Yuru. There were so many people coming and going on the street. She was thin and small, and she couldn't see others. It was reasonable that she was pushed to the side. Thinking of this, Qin Yuru's face relaxed a little. "Brother Tianyu." She turned to Qi Tianyu. "First, Miss Qin, we are all grown up now. This is also the capital city. It's better not to call each other by their names." Qi Tianyu interrupted Qin Yuru's words. He looked up, and his face was calm and gentle. There was no ambiguity in his eyes. "Brother Tianyu, there are no outsiders here." Qin Yuru's eyes turned red. She looked at Qi Tianyu with a pitiful expression and felt wronged. Qin Wanru lowered her head and fiddled with the handkerchief in her hand. A trace of cold sarcasm flashed in her eyes. Qin Yuru was really utilitarian. When she didn't need him, she would dump him. When she needed him, she would call him Brother Tianyu affectionately. It was as if she didn't know that they had nothing to do with each other now. If she continued to call him so affectionately, it would cause misunderstandings. However, looking at Qin Yuru's expression, it seemed that she was going to break up with Qi Tianyu. It was like this in her previous life. In this life, she was going to follow the old path. She wanted to draw Qi Tianyu to her side. When she needed him, she could use him to deal with her. She was really vicious. It was not convenient for Qin Yuru to do something. It was better for Qi Tianyu to do it. In her previous life, they colluded in this way. Of course, part of it was Qin Yuru herself. In her previous life, Qin Yuru was very proud and helped Qi Tianyu a lot. But in this life, Qin Yuru was in a difficult situation. She couldn't even protect herself. Would Qi Tianyu still treat her like this? In their recent contact, the first young master of the Qi family obviously wanted to draw a line with Qin Yuru. But Qin Yuru didn't want to. Qin Wanru was looking forward to their relationship. In her previous life, one was willing to be beaten and the other was willing to be beaten. They were in cahoots. In this life, she wanted to see how the two of them would deal with each other. For this, she was even willing to give them a suitable space. Even if there are no outsiders, we should control ourselves. A gentleman doesn't bully a dark room. Qi Tianyu said gently. His expression was very calm, and he looked like a gentleman. "Brother Tianyu." Tears fell from Qin Yuru's eyes. She covered her tears with her handkerchief and lowered her head. It seemed that she didn't want Qi Tianyu to see her weakness. This trick worked very well in the past. Every time she used it, Qi Tianyu would give in. Qin Wanru continued to turn the handkerchief in her hand. It seemed that she didn't hear Qin Yuru's sweet call of "Brother Tianyu." "Ah." Qi Baiyu smiled. He looked at his helpless elder brother and then at the delicate Qin Yuru. He couldn't help laughing out loud. He laughed and said, "First, Miss Qin, you and my brother are no longer together, right? Do you still want to have something with my brother? You were the one who kicked my big brother out. Do you think my big brother is good now?" His words almost pierced Qin Yuru's heart. It also directly lifted the veil of affection between them. For a moment, everyone was in a different situation. Qin Yuru was the first to react. She burst into tears, turned around, and ran out. Qin Wanru raised her head helplessly and looked at Qi Tianyu. She said with a headache, "First young master of the Qi family, is there anything between you and big sister? Go after her and talk to her." "There is nothing between me and her. I don't know what happened to first Miss Qin," Qi Tianyu said unhappily. He didn't move and looked unwilling to move. Maybe big sister misunderstood. "First young master of the Qi family, you should go and have a look. Big sister will marry into Duke Yong's mansion in the future." If she misunderstood something, it would be more difficult to explain. Qin Wanru looked outside and said. Hearing her words, Qi Tianyu stood up and said helplessly, "I'll go and have a look." After saying this, he strode away and chased after her. "Did I say something wrong? It was always like this. Didn't your big sister abandon my brother? Instead, it was my brother who abandoned your big sister?" Qi Baiyu looked confused. He couldn't understand the situation in front of him. He turned to look at the door and then at Qin Wanru. In the past, it was Qin Yuru who abandoned Qi Tianyu. Now it is Qi Tianyu who abandoned Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru smiled and didn't hide her thoughts. What do you mean? Qi Baiyu rolled his eyes and became interested. He ran to the chair beside Qin Wanru and sat down. Nothing big. I just want to see what they want to do. Qin Wanru sneered and winked at Yujie beside her. Yujie understood and retreated to the door. She identified the direction and hurriedly chased after them. Qin Wanru, is Qin Yuru going to break off the engagement with Duke Yong's mansion? Qi Baiyu didn't quite understand Qin Wanru's words, but he suddenly thought of something and asked anxiously. It's impossible. Qin Wanru shook her head. There was a trace of mist in her watery eyes, which made her look more elegant and refined. Why do you ask? It was impossible for Qin Yuru and Di Yen to break off the engagement. They were now grasshoppers tied on a rope. Neither of them could escape. Both of them had a bad reputation and many interests were involved. They couldn't abandon each other. They were born to be husband and wife. If they couldn't be together, even God would not tolerate it. Of course, she wouldn't tolerate it either. Isn't Qin Yuru going to break off the engagement and look for my brother? Then why did she send so many betrothal gifts? It seems that she is going to give betrothal gifts to my brother. Isn't it from your mansion? But it's not from your mansion. Which family is so close to our family? In the past, Big Brother would come to your mansion whenever he had something to do? Chapter 383. Your parents are going to give betrothal gifts to your elder brother? Qin Wanru asked anxiously after calming down. Yes, they sent a lot of things which are more valuable than the betrothal gifts to your family. Of course, they are not going to give betrothal gifts to me. Qi Baiyu said sarcastically. He was a son of a concubine, so it was impossible for him to get so much attention. Even the betrothal gifts that Qi Tianyu gave to Qin Yuru were more valuable. It could be seen how important this matter was. What did you hear? Qin Wanru straightened up and said seriously. I didn't hear any important news. They just said that these are betrothal gifts. My elder brother has been coming to your mansion a lot recently, and he has been reading all the time except for your mansion. I can't think of any other place to give betrothal gifts except your mansion. Qi Baiyu said casually. His temper was not fixed, and he didn't think much. He was a little jumpy. After saying that, he changed the topic and winked at Qin Wanru, saying, Qin Wanru, do you think your elder sister is flirting with my elder brother now? Can she still marry into Duke Yong's mansion? Qin Wanru sat still with a cold look in her eyes. She pinched her handkerchief hard and seemed to hear Qi Baiyu's words. She just replied lightly, I don't know. She understood. She completely understood. No wonder Qi Tianyu would appear in her mansion from time to time. No wonder Qi Tianyu was so polite to Qin Yuru and cared so much about her calling him Brother Tianyu, but called her Sister Wanru when no one was around. It turned out that this was his plan. All the blood in her body rushed to her head. She bit her lips and suppressed the anger in her heart. He actually wanted to marry her? She was sure that Qi Tianyu wanted to give betrothal gifts to her, so Qi Tianyu frequently appeared in Qin's mansion and pretended that there was nothing between him and Qin Yuru. That was why he called her Qin Huaiyong when she was a child. This was his plan. Qi Tianyu actually wanted to marry her, and Qin Huaiyong obviously agreed. Something was crackling in her mind, like the flickering of fire, but she also felt cold in her heart. The coldness had accumulated to the bottom of her eyes. Qin Wanru, what happened to you? Qi Baiyu said a few more words to Qin Wanru, but he didn't get any response from Qin Wanru. Finally, he realized something was wrong with Qin Wanru, so he hurriedly leaned over and asked, I'm fine. Qin Wanru managed to control herself and slowly calmed down. She slightly raised her lips and said, I'm afraid that the betrothal gifts are really sent to our mansion. What do you mean? Sensing the anger in Qin Wanru's eyes, Qi Baiyu became serious and asked, I'm afraid your good big brother is plotting against me. Qin Wanru said bitterly. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she did not hide the bloodthirsty chill at the bottom of her eyes. Fight to the death? These words were still ringing in his ears, but Qi Tianyu decided to use another method. Qi Baiyu didn't understand at first, but when he did, he got angry. He banged on the table and shouted, "Brother, how dare you mention this? If you weren't smart at that time, you would have been ruined by him. Look at him now, he is also flirting with Qin Yuru, and he even dares to plot against you." The teacup on the table was shaken by the slap, and the water overflowed. They were the clearest about what happened at that time. Qin Wanru was almost ruined by Qi Tianyu. If Qin Wanru didn't smash the sedan chair and attack first, Qi Baiyu didn't dare to imagine how it would end. Not only Qin Wanru, but also him. At that time, he was almost accused of having an affair. Although he was a man, unlike Qin Wanru, who was a woman and would not be doomed eternally, how could he be intact in that kind of scene? When he didn't think of this, Qi Baiyu could still treat Qi Tianyu as his big brother. But when he thought of this, he became wary of Qi Tianyu. Who mentioned this? Compared to Qi Baiyu, Qin Wanru was much calmer. Qi Baiyu sat down again, thought calmly, and said, "This should be brought up by my big brother. There were no betrothal gifts before, but they were suddenly sent later. My big brother also seemed to accept all of them, so he must have known about it." Qin Wanru was silent for a moment, and she was not surprised by this conclusion. Jiangzhou Magistrate Qi and his wife had always looked down on her, and they knew that she was an adopted child during the war. However, Qin Huaiyong must not have told the truth, and they must have thought that she was just an orphan, and Qin Huaiyong kindly took her in. With such an identity, she was not even Qin Huaiyong's biological daughter. In their eyes, she was not even comparable to Qin Huaiyong's daughter of a concubine. This was also the most important reason why Qi Rongji repeatedly bullied her in Jiangzhou, and Magistrate Qi and his wife didn't care about it. They didn't care about her at that time, and they certainly wouldn't care about her now. Even if they really wanted to marry her, they wouldn't prepare so many betrothal gifts, unless someone said something. Qi Tianyu was the only one who could speak to Magistrate Qi and his wife in the capital city. She didn't know how Qi Tianyu noticed her, and he even wanted to marry her. Or it should be said that she didn't know how Qi Tianyu noticed her. Was it her background, or did he notice her? Her family background? Her family background? Qin Wanru thought that Qi Tianyu couldn't be so resourceful to know her. Since it wasn't her family background, it must be her background that attracted the first young master of the Qi family. The green eyes of Ru and great elder princess? Or something that could let Chu Luchen know her and save her? Can you get the letter your parents sent to Qi Tianyu? Qin Wanru's eyes flashed and she asked. "I'll look for it." Qi Baiyu gritted his teeth and said. Qi Baiyu, who had calmed down, was no longer the capricious person he used to be. Qin Wanru knew it when Qi Rongji had an accident in Jingxin Monastery. Maybe he will find something when he goes back today. Qin Wanru reminded Qi Baiyu. She had provoked Qi Rongji before. With Qi Rongji's character, how could she leave without doing anything? She must have gone to talk to Qi Tianyu about this. It was not good for Qi Rongji or Qi Tianyu if Qin Yuru became the adopted daughter of Duke Xing's mansion. In this point, Qi Tianyu would definitely help Qi Rongji. But she didn't know whether it had anything to do with her? Qin Wanru was not sure about this. But there was one thing she was sure about. Qi Tianyu would not be calm tonight. What Qi Rongji said, what Qin Yuru said, what he saw and what he wanted in this situation, it was easy for people to find something they needed. Even if they didn't take it out, it was good to prepare it. At least they wouldn't be flustered at that time. Qi Tianyu had always been a well-prepared person. But at that time, he knew that it was not Qin Yuru who would sit in the bridal sedan chair, but he didn't make things difficult for her in advance. Instead, he wanted to destroy her at the most suitable opportunity. "I know what to do. Don't worry. I'll send someone to tell you once I get the news." Qi Baiyu nodded, and there was a hint of ruthlessness on his face. Several servant girls brought in 4 bowls of noodles each with a tray. Since they had reached an agreement, they didn't say anything more. They each took a bowl of noodles and began to eat. Qin Wanru had eaten before. After a few mouthfuls, she couldn't eat anymore. Qi Baiyu was very hungry, so he finished a big bowl of noodles with the soup. When he finished eating, it was getting late. Qin Wanru didn't accompany Qi Baiyu anymore. She said goodbye to him and returned to her Jifeng pavilion. When Nanny Duan went back, she told them that she would go back to report to Madame Dowager so that Madame Dowager could rest assured. After that, she asked Madame Dowager to go to bed, and they didn't have to go to her to pay their respects. Qin Wanru didn't ask the servant girls to accompany her. She went to the inner courtyard alone. She walked very slowly, waiting for Yu Jie to come back. Considering the time, Qi Tianyu had other plans for her, so he couldn't spend more time with Qin Yuru in private. Sister Yuru, it's okay. Don't cry. I've already told you that I won't forget you in the future. But you can't be so intimate with me in front of others. Qi Tianyu held Qin Yuru's body in his arms and comforted her softly. But when he looked out of the shadow, there was a trace of impatience in his eyes. They had been together for a long time. He didn't know whether Qin Wanru and Qi Baiyu would suspect them. Brother Tianyu, I know it was my fault. I listened to my mother. If it wasn't for that, I would have married Brother Tianyu. Qin Yuru had been having a hard time recently. She and Di Yen hated each other. But she had to tolerate it. In the beginning, Di Yen would coax her, but now he rarely said anything nice to her. He was not as good at talking as Qi Tianyu and was so gentle. Thinking of the feeling of their lips and teeth touching, Qin Yuru became softer and softer. She circled around Qi Tianyu reluctantly. Sister Yuru, let bygones be bygones. From now on, I will be your brother-in-law. We have to avoid arousing suspicion in front of others. Qi Tianyu patted her shoulder gently and said softly, I can't accept it. I can't accept it. You are mine. Why did you become like this? Qin Yuru pulled Qi Tianyu's sleeves and cried again. Then she reached out to hold Qi Baiyu's hand and let it down. Brother Tianyu, please touch my heart. I only have you in my heart. How can I live like this? She said. His hand was pulled down by her. Although Qi Tianyu had other plans in mind and had no feelings for Qin Yuru, he couldn't help it. He raised Qin Yuru's head excitedly and kissed her heavily. His hand moved excitedly. Qin Yuru unconsciously flattered him, and her panting and coquettish voice came out. In the dark, Yu Jie curled her lips. What a shameless couple. They are going to get married, but they still do this kind of thing in private. It seems that they have done this many times before and are very skilled. Chapter 384. When Yu Jie caught up with Qin Wanru had not arrived at Jifeng courtyard and deliberately waited for Yu Jie to come back. Miss, the first young master of the Qi family wants to marry you. After catching up with Qin Wanru, Yu Jie gnashed her teeth and said the first words. The first young master of the Qi family and first miss had clearly behaved improperly, but they still dared to think of Yu Jie. Yu Jie almost rushed out and beat the adulterous couple. What did they say? Qin Wanru calmed down at this time. Miss, you know it? Yu Jie asked in surprise. Yes. Qin Wanru nodded and stood still. She looked into the distance. It was destined that many people would not be able to sleep today. The lights were bright, and the night was still shining. Tell me, what do they want from me? Yu Jie was stunned, and suddenly a strange sadness came to her heart. Sure enough, a child without biological parents could only rely on herself when she was schemed against. Looking at the beautiful side view of her miss, Yu Jie was so sad that she could not even speak. She had been with Qin Wanru for a long time, and she felt that Qin Wanru was more intelligent and decisive than ordinary women. Sometimes, Qin Wanru was even ruthless. But thinking of her current situation, if she was not so, she would have been trampled into the mud by others. Do they want to maintain a relationship in secret and pretend to be polite in public? As for the past, they are generous enough not to mention it, but in fact, they want Qin Yuru to help them settle this matter as soon as possible. Qin Wanru continued. She turned her head elegantly, and her eyes were like the thick night, and her smile was cold and vicious. Sure enough, either you die or I live, but I want to live. Yu Jie was severely shocked. She looked at Qin Wanru in astonishment and almost couldn't say a word. She was born in the nunnery, and all she had heard in the past were words of kindness to others. She had never heard such ruthless or even bloody words. That kind of bloodthirsty hostility almost rushed to her face. But she knew that this was the best way. The weak were prey to the strong. If second Miss was a little more gentle, she would have been gnawed to death at this time. "Miss, don't worry, I will protect you." The words slipped out of her mouth unconsciously. When she finished, Yujia immediately came to her senses and lowered her head in shame. Compared to the young miss, she was far too lacking. Qin Wanru smiled, and her voice sounded soft in the night, which diluted the bloody hostility just now. Although Yujia behaved very quickly and would help her deal with affairs wholeheartedly, Qin Wanru was worried that Yujia was still too soft-hearted and her own future was destined to be turbulent. If Yujia, who came from a monastery, could not be ruthless, Qin Wanru had better make arrangements for her early. If he was too kind, he would only become a stepping stone for others. Yujia, Mingqiu Nun is going to the capital, and we have to find a nunnery to settle down. Qin Wanru stepped forward and said with a smile. The frail and slender girl was actually not big, but when her figure fell on Yujia, it inexplicably made her feel at ease. Although second Miss was young, she would definitely be able to protect her. She took a few steps forward and expressed her doubts about the meaning of Qin Wanru's words. "Miss, Mingqiu Nun is going to live in the nunnery. Why do we also have to live there? I'm still young, and I don't want to go to Duke Xing's mansion for the time being." Qin Wanru said meaningfully. No matter what Madame of Duke Xing and Qin Yuru were planning, at least she could be sure that they would not succeed. Her identity would inevitably be revealed to the world, and she would also find out about her biological parents bit by bit. But there was one thing that she would not live in Duke Xing's mansion for the time being. But it would be unjustifiable if she did not live in Duke Xing's mansion. If she went there, she would be restricted at a young age. Even her maternal grandmother, and great elder princess, could not take her away at will. After all, she was still different from Hao. Since Rin and great elder princess had taken Hao back, it was no longer appropriate to mention her affairs. Therefore, she needed an opportunity, a reason to make Duke Xing's mansion have to temporarily let her leave Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Yuru's affairs were very good, and she could even delay the development of the situation. As for Qi Tianyu's affairs, she was not in a hurry. Such a big thing happened tonight, and no one was in the mood to have a happy event at this time, and the person Qin Yuru met tonight, if she guessed correctly, should be that woman. After her rebirth, she did not expect that they would meet so soon. The assassination of Prince Qing on the eve of the Spring Festival made the Imperial court furious again. The officials who were in charge of the security were scolded badly and ordered to find the murderer quickly. Another reason why the emperor was so angry was that it was said that the weak Prince Qin was also watching the scene at that time and was scared. After returning to the palace, he fainted and did not wake up until this morning. Everyone saw the emperor's love and tolerance for Prince Qin. How could the emperor not be furious when such a thing happened to Prince Qin? Among the officials who were scolded badly were Qin Huaiyong and Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue had not fully recovered. The so-called management was actually mainly his subordinates, and he was only responsible for the central dispatch. It was just an idle job. No one expected that such a thing would happen, and they were also scolded badly. Qin Huaiyong followed Chu Luiyue out of the Imperial study. Standing in the corridor, he saw Chu Luiyue's increasingly gloomy face. After thinking for a while, he stepped forward and bowed. "Your Highness, what should we do next?" "How to investigate? Of course, we have to do our best to investigate it. Eldest brother, Uncle Wang and third brother both had an accident. We have to find out the truth. Father has entrusted everything to you." Before Chu Luiyue answered, a voice with slight power came from behind. Qin Huaiyong turned around and saw Prince Zhou striding over with a few eunuchs. "Second brother." Chu Luiyue calmed down and said lightly. "Eldest brother, I just went to see Uncle Wang and third brother. Uncle Wang is fine and only has some minor skin wounds. But third brother's condition is not so good. But he has recovered and is resting now. I didn't see him." Chu Liuzhou walked over slowly with a serious face. "What's the news, second brother?" Chu Luiyue asked. "Nothing. I just heard that third brother met a beauty in private yesterday." "Who is it?" Chu Liuzhou said. I heard that third brother is very mysterious. He specially wrapped the beauty and sent her away. Are you afraid that others will know? What do you want to say, second brother? Chu Liwei took a deep breath and looked as cold as ever. Actually, I didn't say anything. I just heard that the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion returned to the mansion last night, but she left early this morning. Chu Liuzhou said with a faint smile. Now the whole capital city thought that there was something going on between him and the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, which was caused by Chu Luchen. A trace of anger flashed across Chu Liyue's face, but he had to suppress it. I was in the palace yesterday and didn't know about it. Ah, so you didn't do it for me? I thought it was my eldest brother. I made a mistake. Chu Liuzhou said with insincerity. He made as many excuses as he could. It was obvious that he did it on purpose. Chu Liyue's expression didn't change much this time. Second brother, if there is nothing else, I will go to deal with the business first. Eldest brother, please. Chu Liuzhou took a step back and made way for him. Chu Liwei glanced at Qin Huaiyong and strode away. They still had to discuss specific affairs. Qin Huaiyong understood. After bowing to Prince Zhou, he followed Chu Liwei out. Behind them, Chu Liuzhou narrowed his eyes and looked at Chu Liyue's back. He murmured to himself, who did it? How could he be so sure that Uncle Wang would return to the capital city? Or is it really just a coincidence that Uncle Wang is unlucky? This was what Prince Qing said when he went to visit Prince Qing. Prince Qing seemed to want to keep the peace. It seemed that he didn't want to pursue this matter anymore. If it was only Prince Qing who had an accident and Prince Qing said so, the emperor didn't need to urge him so much. But Chu Luchen, the invalid, was involved. It was not so simple. Chu Liuzhou didn't go out of the palace last night. He just wandered outside and came back early. When he came back, he knew that something had happened. When he went out again, it had already been over. Until now, Chu Liuzhou still didn't know who they were going to deal with yesterday. If they were dealing with Prince Qing seemed to be fine. His minor injury was not even comparable to the injury they had suffered at that time. If they were dealing with Chu Luchen, the invalid was in a precarious condition. No one knew when he would be unable to hold on. So they didn't have to plot against him. However, Chu Liuzhou was also secretly vigilant. When Chu Luchen had an accident, he made such a scene for fear of being responsible. Now Chu Luchen fainted again. Could it be that someone used Chu Luchen to plot against him? Thinking of this, he immediately felt that it made sense. Chu Luchen was not important. What was important was his position in the hearts of his father and imperial grandmother. Someone used Chu Luchen to deal with him. As for the woman, it was really hard to tell whether it was true or not. The invalid could barely protect himself, but he still dared to think about a woman. He was courting death. It was true that the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion came to the capital city. In fact, he had been informed. What he said just now could be regarded as a half-true and half-false test. Send some more medicinal materials to Prince Chen. Tell him that it's my and mother's will. Don't send them directly to Prince Chen's people, but to Imperial Grandmother. I heard that a nun with good medical skills has come to Imperial Grandmother's side. It's all because of her medical skills that third brother can wake up today. Ask her to take a look at the medicinal materials before giving them to Prince Chen. Chu Liuzhou ordered. His order was very reasonable. It not only flattered the Empress Dowager, but also let the Empress Dowager use these medicinal materials without worry. Moreover, it also showed his innocence. Even Prince Zhou, the legitimate son of the Empress, had to behave like this at this time. He couldn't be too far away or too close. Yes, Your Highness. A eunuch beside him answered. Qin Wanru heard Madame Dowager's summon after breakfast. Because she was worried that Qin Wanru would sleep late yesterday, she specially told her not to go to greet Madame Dowager in the morning today. When she arrived at Madame Dowager's courtyard and saw the aggressive people in the hall, she walked up to them with indifferent eyes and bowed, standing behind Madame Dowager. Chapter 385. Madame Dowager sat above with a sullen face. Sitting opposite her were old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion, Countess Yong, and Di Fenglun. Seeing Qin Wanru come in, they all looked at her unkindly. Qin Wanru glanced around and found that Shui Ruolin was not here. She was afraid that people from Duke Yong's mansion would disturb Shui Ruolin, so she deliberately asked her to stay away. Madame Dowager seemed to be a little weak because of this, so she asked her to come here to support the situation. After saluting Madame Dowager nodded and motioned her to stand behind her. Before she stood still, Di Fenglan had started to attack Qin Wanru first. Second, Miss Qin, did you force my aunt to commit suicide? Qin Wanru stood behind Madame Dowager, looked up at Di Fenglan unhurriedly, and sneered in her heart. No wonder so many people from Duke Yong's mansion came here. They wanted to suppress our mansion by force. They planned to attack the young and the old one by one. How about Madame D's matter? You can ask several servant girls and old maids who were present at that time. If you don't believe it, you can ask them separately. Qin Wanru said with indifferent eyes. We are all servants in your mansion. You can say whatever you want. My aunt was fine. Why did she suddenly take things too hard? Now she is lying on the bed half dead and can't even speak. It's all because of you. Di Fenglan frowned and said with hatred. You're right. Miss D, I don't understand your words. Qin Wanru said coldly. She glanced at Countess Yong and old Madame. Seeing that they were silent with sullen faces and let Di Fenglan attack them, Qin Wanru's eyes were cold. Qin Wanru, don't pretend in front of me. Madame Shui wanted to pull my aunt down from the position of legal wife and replace her. My aunt retreated again and locked herself in the backyard, but Madame Shui still refused to stop. You helped Madame Shui to plot against my aunt and forced my aunt to commit suicide. Even if this matter is reported to the court, you must give my aunt justice. Di Fenglan raised her voice and sneered, aggressive. In this way, it seemed that it was Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru who harmed Madame D. Madame D retreated again and again, which made her appear to be generous and gentle. This was really a reversal of right and wrong. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart, and her icy eyes fell on Di Fenglan. She smiled faintly and said, Miss D, where did you get this information? Are there any witnesses? If there is no witness, can we say that Miss D deliberately framed our family? Is this how Miss D usually learns her manners? Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Wanru, how dare you? Di Fenglan's face turned red and she said angrily. If she really had such a rumor, her reputation would be ruined. Recently, the mansion was planning to arrange a marriage for her. If this news were to spread out, the marriage would no longer be discussed. Miss D, it's hard to say whether I'm being presumptuous or not. I don't know who you're relying on to shout at my grandmother. Qin Wanru's cold eyes fell on Di Fenglan. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to see through other people's hearts, which made Di Fenglan feel guilty. What happened last night had already been spread to Duke Yong's mansion. How could she not know it? At this time, it was also her grandmother's idea to put the blame on her. At this time, being suppressed by Qin Wanru again and again, she suddenly blushed. Qin Wanru. Seeing that she was in a weak position, she became more and more anxious and snapped. Qin Wanru interrupted her mercilessly, curled her lips and said, Miss D, I respect you as a miss from an aristocratic family of dukes and marquises, but I don't know why you are so rude. In front of so many people, you repeatedly shouted my name. Why did you come here? Her words made Di Fenglan feel ashamed and angry. She had always been arrogant and directly called Qin Wanru's name many times. But now in the hall, so many people heard, Qin Wanru called her Miss D, while she shouted Qin Wanru's name. It was obvious who was superior. Di Fenglan originally came with full confidence, but she did not expect that Qin Wanru would be so strong and eloquent. Qin Wanru's words made her speechless. She had never suffered such anger in her own mansion, not to mention being reprimanded by Qin Wanru in front of her mother and grandmother. For a moment, she was so angry that she heavily patted the table beside her and was about to stand up angrily. Fenglan. Countess Yong saw that it was not good and hurriedly scolded in a low voice. After suppressing Di Fenglan, she looked at Qin Wanru with gloomy eyes and said coldly, Has second Miss Qin always been so sharp-tongued? No wonder my sister suffered such a big loss. Now she is forced to live a life worse than death. Madam Dowager, if you really can't keep my sister alive, our two families will separate peacefully. The so-called separation meant that everyone got married and parted peacefully. When a husband and wife were not on good terms, the man was always strong. Basically, he would be divorced or given the cold shoulder. Especially in this kind of aristocratic family, there would never be a separation. The so-called separation usually meant that the man would suffer losses. Madame D was Qin Huaiyong's legal wife. The most likely reason for the man to suffer losses was that he favored his concubine to the detriment of his wife. Although a co-wife was also a wife, her status was still slightly inferior to that of a legal wife. Saying that he favored his concubine to the detriment of his wife not only pushed Qin Huaiyong to the teeth of the storm, but also made Shui Ruolin bear all the blame. Duke Yong's mansion's way of advancing by retreating could be said to kill two birds with one stone, which was extremely vicious. The first half of this sentence was said to Qin Wanru, which meant that Qin Wanru could reply, but her reply could not involve the separation. Countess Yong said this to Madame Dowager, and as a junior, she could not intervene casually. The only thing she could refute was what Countess Yong said to her just now. Madam, please forgive me. I'm not sharp-tongued. It's just that everything needs evidence. Our mansion has evidence, but do you have evidence for what Miss D said just now? Qin Wanru took over the topic unhurriedly and calmly shifted the focus of the topic to the previous thing. It could be seen that Madame Dowager did not expect that Countess Yong proposed a separation. Madame Dowager should not have thought of this way of advancing by retreating. Stunned, she was thinking about countermeasures at this time. Qin Wanru took over the topic, which gave her some time to think about how to deal with this matter. Evidence? Are you talking about the servants in your mansion? Countess Yong sneered and said to Qin Wanru. Originally, she did not want to argue with Qin Wanru and directly confront Madame Dowager. However, Qin Wanru came to find her, which made her unable to suppress the anger in her heart for a moment. Seeing her daughter being defeated just now, Countess Yong was already burning with anger. Madam, I don't quite understand what you mean. It happened in our mansion, and it was an accident. Naturally, only the people in our mansion saw it. Do you hope that the people of Duke Yong's mansion would be prepared early and watch the whole scene? Qin Wanru looked at Countess Yong calmly, and was not suppressed by her momentum. Hearing this, Countess Yong was so angry that her face turned blue. This speech meant that she wanted her to set up early and deliberately help Madame D to put on a show. Since they are all from your mansion, what they said is of course the master's idea. Where did you get the evidence? After calming down, Countess Yong suppressed the anger in her heart and said with a sneer. After all, she was not Di Fenglan. Before they came here, they had already discussed this matter. They insisted that they were all from Qin's mansion, and they would not admit it. Today, they would ask Qin's mansion to give them an explanation. Not only Shui Ruolin, but also Qin Wanru, they would not get any benefits. Based on the identity of Duke Yong's mansion and Madame D's current miserable situation, as long as they insisted, Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru would not get any benefits. Madam, your words are too arbitrary. But since you said so, there is really a witness. It is said that the doctor who treated Madame D is also familiar with Duke Yong's mansion, and it seems that he was introduced by Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru had already prepared and knew that Duke Yong's mansion would not let it go. Qin Huaiyong also knew about this. The doctor who made a false testimony yesterday did not leave the mansion last night and was directly detained. Who would believe the words of a doctor who had an accident? Countess Yong said coldly. Although old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion did not speak, her eyes fell on Qin Wanru as if they were solid, like a venomous snake, waiting to bite Qin Wanru to death when she was weak. Madam, whose words do you think are trustworthy? Qin Wanru raised her head and did not panic. Of course not from your mansion, and he has a good reputation. Madame of Duke Yong said coldly. She did not believe that others could see that she had bitten so hard. Although Qin's mansion was a new noble, it was also an aristocratic family. This kind of thing could not be cleared even if it was brought to the court. What's more, Qin Huaiyong could not afford to lose face. If this thing was brought to the court, the inner court would be in chaos, And Madame D was now in such a miserable situation, which was enough to make many people sympathize with Madame D and blame Madame Shui. Madame Shui might as well give up the baby in her belly. There is another doctor, who is not from our mansion, and he has a good reputation. If Madame wants to see him, you can see him. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, "Another doctor. Your Qin's mansion has prepared a lot of doctors. Could it be that you have known that my sister would be forced to this point, so you have prepared doctors in advance?" Countess Yong said sarcastically, "This doctor has a good reputation, and he is not from our mansion. Can't he be a witness? Even if we go to the hall, he can also be a witness." Qin Wanru said lightly, "Then let's go to the court." Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion took over the topic in a cold voice. She stood up and said to Madame Dowager, "Since this matter cannot be cleared, let's go to the court." As soon as she said this, Madame Dowager's face changed dramatically. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Madame Dowager's hand, and her hand trembled slightly. Chapter 386. They were forcing Qin's mansion to make concessions. Moreover, they wanted to drag Shui Ruolin into the trouble and bring it to the court. If Madame D went to court, Shui Ruolin also had to go to court. With Shui Ruolin's current health, plus the depression and shame in her heart, wouldn't it kill her? Duke Yong's mansion really made a good plan. Madame D's current appearance had already made people feel sorry for her. Even if there was evidence, many people would stand on Madame D's side. In addition, Duke Yong's mansion would help her, and even Duke Xing's mansion might help her. Even the court would not be so accurate. The doctor was the only one who could be counted as a witness, but if something happened to the doctor, there would be no more convincing witness. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. Last night, Duke Yong's mansion did not directly make trouble. It seemed that they were discussing how to deal with it. They might even get the guarantee of someone. Today, they came with people aggressively. Madame D had such a big thing yesterday. Of course, they would report it to Duke Yong's mansion immediately. "Old Madam, please take care. In fact, there is still a witness." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and took 2 steps forward. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion raised her head high and said nothing with arrogance. Di Fenglan sneered and said, "Second Miss Qin, there is another witness. Why don't you call him out? This person's status is too high. I can't call him out." Qin Wanru said indifferently. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion looked at Qin Wanru's calm face. Her heart skipped a beat and she suddenly felt that it was not good. Countess Yong's face turned serious and she said hurriedly, "In fact, I saw what happened in Madame D's yard yesterday. I also saw those old maids reply. There was also a distinguished guest who replied to the doctor. He happened to come to our mansion yesterday and saw the whole thing. In fact, this matter doesn't need to be brought to court. As long as this distinguished guest says something, it will be clear." Qin Wanru said indifferently. Countess Yong gritted her teeth and said, "Prince, you happened to be in our mansion yesterday. If you don't believe me, you can ask him." Qin Wanru said generously. Her words made the faces of several people of Duke Yong's mansion stiffen. None of them expected that Prince Yu would witness the whole process of this matter, and it seemed that Prince Yu had seen the whole process of Qin Huayong's interrogation of the witness. "Old Madam, if you don't believe me, you can go to Prince Yu's mansion to ask." Madame Dowager also reacted at this time, raised her head and said bluntly, "Go to Prince Yu's mansion to ask?" Moreover, he knew that Madame D reaped what she sowed. Countess Yong looked at Old Madam and felt embarrassed. It was possible that she would be reprimanded if she asked. Old Madam's face was gloomy. Originally, she wanted to bite the Qin's mansion to death. She thought that the Qin's mansion would not dare to fight with them and would definitely make concessions again and again. Of course, they did not really want to go to court, but if they took this as a condition, the Qin's mansion would definitely compromise. At that time, no matter what conditions they put forward, Qin's mansion would have to agree to them. But they did not expect that this thing was seen by Prince Yu. With Prince Yu as a witness, no matter what they said or what they insisted, it would be useless, and it might even affect Duke Yong's mansion. Although Madame D was the daughter of Old Madam, she had little to do with Countess Yong. In contrast, Countess Yong was certainly afraid that this matter would affect her children, and she was afraid that this matter would affect Duke Yong's mansion. If this was really a farce made by Madame D, and the purpose was to harm Shui Ruolin, with Prince Yu's testimony, Duke Yong's mansion would lose face. And her daughter's marriage would be affected. Countess Yong could not bear it anymore. Old Madam, did Prince Yu really see it? Old Madam's eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face coldly, capturing the slightest expression on Qin Wanru's face. Qin Wanru raised her head and looked directly at Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion. She said calmly, "Old Madam, if you don't believe me, my grandmother can send someone to ask Prince Yu now." Last night, Prince Cheng was assassinated, and even the most favored Prince Chen was involved. At this time, Prince Yu must be investigating what happened yesterday. At this time, Old Madam of Duke Yong did not dare to bother him with this kind of thing. Looking at Qin Wanru's calm face, Old Madam wavered. This should be true, right? Otherwise, Qin Wanru would not dare to say such words, and it seemed that she was going to call someone over to confront immediately. Old Madam of Duke Yong had already known what happened to Madame D last night, and the doctor was sent after they hinted. Unexpectedly, it was Madame D who had the accident. "Old Madam, I want to see my daughter." Old Madam reluctantly moved her eyes away from Qin Wanru's face, looked at Old Madam, and her voice softened imperceptibly. "Nanny Duan, take Old Madam to Yulon Pavilion." Old Madam nodded and said with a sigh of relief, knowing that the crisis was over. "My daughter had such an accident, and I heard that she could not speak. Yuru should not be locked up anymore, right?" Old Madam said coldly. Of course, she meant to let Qin Yuru out. "Old Madam, don't worry. Big Sister had already been released from confinement at that time. Father originally wanted Big Sister to serve Madame D." Qin Wanru said with a smile. This was really expected. Now it was not a matter of not allowing Qin Yuru to serve Madame D, but whether Qin Yuru had the face to go there or not, and whether she dared to go there. "Let's go." Old Madam turned and said. The people of Duke Yong's mansion followed her and walked out of the door. Seeing the people of Duke Yong's mansion leave, Madame Dowager breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, she secretly wiped her cold sweat. Prince Yu was indeed there yesterday, but he didn't see much. If she asked him to be a witness, he would not be a powerful witness, not to mention whether he was willing to or not. Moreover, with Prince Yu's identity, how could he casually care about this kind of inner court matter? This was also a very puzzling thing after Qin Huaiyong and Old Madam discussed last night. They knew that Duke Yong's mansion would come to make trouble, but they did not know to what extent they would make trouble. Qin's mansion would make appropriate concessions, but if it really involved too much, Old Madam and Qin Huaiyong would absolutely not give in. But this kind of refusal might cause a rift between the two families. If this matter was really brought to the court, Qin Huaiyong would definitely not get a good result, and might even be hindered in his official career. If he could not even deal with his own backyard matter, how could he deal with the affairs of the world? He might even be criticized by the Imperial censor, so Old Madam and Qin Huaiyong could not make a decision for a while. Later, something happened outside. Before Qin Huaiyong went out, he had told Old Madam that if people of Duke Yong's mansion came, they must delay it until he came back. But they did not expect that Qin Huaiyong had not come back since he went out early this morning, and Duke Yong's mansion came to them aggressively, as if they were going to tear apart and make trouble. Fortunately, Qin Wanru's words just now made Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion give up the idea of making trouble. Of course, it was all thanks to Qin Wanru. Madame Dowager felt sad for a while when thinking that a little girl like her could be so calm in front of so many people of Duke Yong's mansion and keep a straight face so that she could send Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion away. She reached out and pulled Qin Wanru to sit down beside her. She waved her hand, and the servant girls and old maids in the room all left. Yujia also retreated to the door, looked outside, and stood by the door. "Wanru, will they stop just like this?" Madame Dowager sighed in distress. At this time, she couldn't find anyone to talk to. In addition, Qin Wanru's behavior just now made her think highly of Qin Wanru. At this time, she discussed her worries with Qin Wanru. "Grandma, don't worry. They will not make trouble for the time being." Qin Wanru comforted Old Madam softly. Temporarily? Will they still make trouble from time to time? Old Madam frowned tightly. Grandma, whether they will make trouble in the future depends on the situation, but at least for the time being. Later, Grandma, please send more servants to serve Madam D in the yard, and then remove the old maids who guard the door, so that Yulon Pavilion can be restored to the past. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, Madam D's current situation was basically ruined, and she was ruined in the hands of her daughter. But no matter what, she was really miserable now. What Qin's mansion should do now was to treat Madam D very well and value her very much. They could not let Duke Yong's mansion take advantage of this matter. This is what your father and I mean, but... Old Madam said awkwardly. Grandma, is it because there is no servant around Madam D? Qin Wanru said with confidence. Big sister doesn't need to be confined. You can let her serve Madam D. In this way, Duke Yong's mansion will also be satisfied. It is supposed to let your big sister serve Madam D. But just now Yuru said that she was frightened yesterday, and now she can't get up. Old Madam said with a headache. It was a natural thing for a daughter to take care of her sick mother, but Qin Yuru was also sick at this time, and it seemed that she was seriously ill. However, if no one took care of Madam D, it would be somewhat unreasonable. After all, there was still Qin Wanru in the mansion. Although Qin Huaiyong had ordered Qin Wanru to have nothing to do with Madam D, she was now an elder, and now she was so miserable, and Qin Yuru was sick. But Madam D had never been kind to Qin Wanru, and old Madam was worried that Qin Wanru would be wronged by Madam D. Madam Dowager and Qin Huaiyong both knew that she reaped what she sowed this time, but she still had to pretend to show it to others. Otherwise, the people of Duke Yong's mansion would pick up another topic and talk nonsense. Grandma, I will serve Madam D. Qin Wanru knew old Madam's dilemma, and said with a smile. You go? Old Madam frowned and hesitated, and then shook her head. You'd better not go. But now I am the only junior in the mansion. If I don't go, it will be unreasonable. Qin Wanru analyzed with a smile. Her words made old Madam speechless for a while. She lowered her head and took a deep breath. Old Madam was really afraid that Madam D would do something evil again. Even though Madam D couldn't move now, old Madam was still worried. Grandma, don't worry. I will go. I believe that Madam D will ask me to come back soon. Qin Wanru smiled confidently. Her refusal to go and Madam D's refusal to let her go were totally different. Chapter 387. Your big sister? Old Grandma didn't understand what she meant. Grandma, although big sister is sick, she can't be compared with Madam D now. Since I'm going, how can big sister, as her biological daughter, not go? Even if she is sick and can't serve Madam D in person, she should show her sincerity and let big sister live in Yulon Pavilion. When Madam D sees big sister, she will be in a good mood and get better. Qin Wanru said softly. Qin Yuru didn't want to go, so she insisted. Let your big sister move to Madam D's place? Madam Dowager thought for a while and thought it was a good reason. She nodded and sighed. That's okay. Anyway, Madam D is your big sister's mother. Even if Madam D asked for it, big sister can't let go of it. Since Grandma agrees, send someone to inform big sister now. Qin Wanru suggested with a smile. Coincidentally, several people from Duke Yong's mansion are here. If big sister goes there now, she can definitely shut them up. What she said was reasonable. Several people from Duke Yong's mansion were here to make trouble now. If Qin Yuru went there, she could shut them up so that they wouldn't say they didn't care about it. Old Grandma agreed and sent an old maid to call Qin Yuru. Seeing the old maid leave, Qin Wanru's eyes flashed with coldness. Sure enough, Father didn't tell Grandma all the truth. Grandma obviously didn't know that Qin Yuru was the culprit who hurt Madam D. She wanted to kill her biological mother, but now she didn't die and lived with Madam D in a half-dead state. Let's see what Qin Yuru would do. Qin Yuru must be scared in her heart, otherwise she wouldn't pretend to be sick to avoid it. She wanted to avoid it, but this time she wouldn't let her. Let's see how she would get along with Madam D and how she would make trouble. When Qin Yuru arrived at Yulon Pavilion, Several people from Duke Yong's mansion were still here. They had sent someone to invite them, but Qin Yuru said that she was sick and would come late. This delay lasted for a long time. If it weren't for Madame D's current condition, old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion had to say something to Qin Yuru personally. People from Duke Yong's mansion would have gone back. Looking at Qin Yuru who came late, old Madame's mansion became more gloomy. Grandmother. Seeing old Madame, Qin Yuru's tears fell immediately. She let out a sad cry, but could not say anything. She knelt down in front of old Madame, put her hands on old Madame's knees, and burst into tears. Old Madame looked at her daughter, who was lying on the bed, and then looked at Qin Yuru, who was crying with grievance, and her eyes turned red. She loved her daughter the most. When she was young, her daughter was immature and made mistakes, so she had to marry far away. Now that she finally came back, she was in such a miserable state. How could she not feel hurt? She reached out to hold Qin Yuru's head. Her previous annoyance turned into sadness and she wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Seeing that they hugged each other and cried bitterly, Countess Yong also pretended to wipe the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. Fenglan, support your cousin. Your grandmother is old and can't bear such sadness. Di Fenglan came over and helped Qin Yuru up. She stood up. Sobbing, Qin Yuru sat down on a chair at the side. Tears fell down her cheeks. She did not look well today. She did not know if it was because of the lack of rouge, but her pale face was a little yellow. Well, what happened to your mother? Old Madame had been through this. She had wiped her tears and asked in a low voice. Grandmother, mother is... Qin Yuru cried so hard that she couldn't speak. She was at a loss because her biological mother had become like this. Countess Yong persuaded her again, and then Qin Yuru told her what happened at that time. In her narration, Madame D's previous events were very clear. As for the later events, she was much more vague. She only said that Madame D might have hung herself for a long time. When she came in and saved Qin Yuru, she was already like this. No one knew why. After she finished telling the story, old Madame became silent. Nanny Zhou, who stood in front of the bed, looked at Qin Yuru and then looked at old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion. She shrank to the side of the bed and stood there with her head down. Of course, she could distinguish which words of First Miss were true and which were false, but she didn't dare to say anything. Good girl, you have suffered a lot. You have to serve your mother when you are not in good health. But if you are not with your mother, the girl over there will come over. I am really worried about that tricky girl. Old Madame comforted Qin Yuru in a low voice. Grandmother, let mother go back to Duke Yong's mansion with me. I don't want to live here. Qin Yuru held the handkerchief and cried again, begging. Looking at her pitiful and pale face, and thinking of Qin Wanru's delicate and radiant face before, old Madame felt suffocated. She only felt that it was Xue Ruolin and Qin Wanru's fault that her daughter fell into such a situation. If Xue Ruolin did not become Qin Huaiyong's co-wife, if Qin Wanru did not make so much trouble, this would not happen. Old Madame pitied her daughter and her granddaughter. She felt that everything was the fault of others, but she also felt guilty about this matter. She even had a plot in it. She didn't expect that it would hurt her daughter in the end. For a moment, she felt sad and her eyes turned red. Yuru, you can't go back for the time being. Didn't your mother tell you before? Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion also likes you very much and has almost approved of you. The room was full of people of Duke Yong's mansion. This time they came here with their confidants, so old Madame made it clear. These things were Madame D's plan, and old Madame thought it was good. This matter was good for Madame D, Qin Yuru and Duke Yong's mansion. Grandma, mother? Seeing old Madame comforting her again and again, Qin Yuru felt relieved. It seemed that her grandmother didn't know it, which was really great. She sniffed and looked at old Madame with grievance, as if she didn't want to say anything else and only cared about her mother. Seeing this, old Madame felt heartache and sad. Her voice became more and more gentle. Your mother is like this now, but she still wants you to be a good person. Grandma will tell the people of Qin's mansion to let you out and not lock you up anymore. You can find a way to contact Duke Xing's mansion. It's better to ask them to take you to Duke Xing's mansion. If you are in Duke Xing's mansion, your father will not dare to treat your mother badly. But I can't stop worrying about my mother. Qin Yuru cried with red eyes. Even if you can't let it go, you have to let it go. Remember, only when you are well, your mother will be well, and today's hatred can be avenged. Seeing that she still cared about Madame D so much, old Madame felt gratified and sad, but she was afraid that she would make a mistake, so she scolded her with a cold face. But mother is like this, who can I talk to about this matter? Qin Yuru still cried like a pear blossom in the rain, as if she had nothing to live for when Madame D was like this. You can talk to Nanny Huang. Old Madame said. She came here today to talk to her about this matter. Talk to Nanny Huang? Nanny Huang who teaches education? Qin Yuru was stunned for a moment. Nanny Huang didn't seem to be very good to her before, and it seemed that she was not on her side. If it weren't for her mother's words when she was discharged from the hospital this time, she would never think that Nanny Huang was on her side. But even if Nanny Huang came up with the idea, could she really believe her? Qin Yuru looked at old Madame with a puzzled face and looked very confused and pitiful. Yes, just talk to Nanny Huang. I have sent someone to talk to her. Anyway, you can talk to her in the future. Seeing Qin Yuru like this, old Madame felt more and more pity for her. Originally, of course, she also wanted Di Yen to marry Qin Yuru as soon as possible. But since Madame D told her her previous plan, she also thought it was better. Compared with marrying into Duke Yong's mansion in a hurry, if Qin Yuru could get such a background, it would be a matter of rising to the sky in one step. Not only would she benefit, but her own Duke Yong's mansion would also benefit a lot. After all, Qin Yuru would marry Di Yen in the future. No matter what her identity would be in the future, the marriage had been set long ago. In fact, it was not difficult to control Nanny Huang. She didn't control her before because she didn't think it was necessary. But now that Madame D was in trouble, Nanny Zhou was too busy to take care of Madame D, so she naturally had no time to help Qin Yuru. Old Madame thought of Nanny Huang, the etiquette instructor who had already entered the mansion to teach Qin Yuru. Last night, she had already sent someone to bribe Nanny Huang's family. Just now, she just sent someone to inform them. At this time, if she sent someone to Qin's mansion again, she would not be valued again. It was better to use the original ones. Nanny Huang could become an etiquette instructor, so she naturally had extraordinary means. Previously, Countess Yong had a good relationship with her and treated her very well. Now she would bribe Nanny Huang's family again. Compared with Nanny Zhou, Nanny Huang was more knowledgeable and had more means. She would definitely be a good helper for Qin Yuru. Old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion thought so and also did so. She couldn't let her poor granddaughter be bullied in Qin's mansion. Will Nanny Huang help me in the future? Qin Yuru asked cautiously. Looking at such a cautious granddaughter, old Madame felt like being pricked by needles and became more and more resentful. Don't worry, Nanny Huang will help you. She may not have done her best in the past, but she won't in the future. Old Madame whispered, and a trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. Yes, Grandma. Yuru will listen to Grandma. Qin Yuru said obediently. You have to take good care of your mother. When your mother is well, Grandma will definitely let them pay back what they owe us first. Old Madame said sternly. But now mother is like this. Qin Yuru turned her head and looked at Madame D, who was lying on the bed. She didn't know whether she was alive or not. She was secretly happy, but showed a wronged expression. Chapter 388. Grandma, what can you do? Qin Yuru rushed to the bedside and looked at Madame D, who was crying with grief. She looked pale, which made her look more delicate and weak. Di Fenglan also sympathized with her. She came over and squatted in front of Madame D's bed with her. She comforted her in a low voice. Cousin, don't cry. Grandma has arranged everything. An imperial physician will come here soon. Today my father went to the palace early to invite an imperial physician. Imperial physician. An imperial physician will come to treat my mother? Qin Yuru was shocked and raised her head hurriedly. Her hand that touched the head of the bed trembled. If her mother was really fine, how could she live? Others didn't know, but she knew that her mother was seriously injured because of her. But in that case, she had no choice. If her mother was not seriously injured, Qin Wanru and Shui Ruolin would be fine. This should not be her mother's idea, right? Now the reason why things became like this was that her mother did not plan well and made many loopholes. Otherwise, how could she become like this while Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru were fine? Yes, it was Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru's fault. If it were not for them, her mother would not have come up with this method to deal with them. So even if her mother recovered, she would not blame her. Thinking of this, she was not so flustered. Yes, invite Imperial physician Li from the palace. He has excellent medical skills. Your mother will be fine. Old Madam thought that Qin Yuru was still sad, so she comforted her. Qin Yuru did not speak this time. She just wiped her tears and nodded. Countess Yong, who did not like her very much, saw her so filial lying in front of Madame D's bed, and her heart softened involuntarily. She came over and helped her up with Di Fenglan. Well, don't cry. If you have any problems in the future, you can find a way to spread the news. Your grandma and I will definitely support you. If you need anything, if you want us to send it to Duke Xing's mansion, Aunt will also help you. Thank you, Aunt. Qin Yuru cried and was about to bend down again. Countess Yong hurriedly reached out to hold her. Ask everyone else to leave. Old Madam looked at the nanny beside Countess Yong and said, Yes, Old Madam. Countess Yong knew that Old Madam felt that her confidants were not considerate enough, so she sent them all out. She did not dare to disobey. She waved her hand and all the servants left. Nanny Zhou looked around and saw that she was the only servant. She lowered her head and wanted to leave, but was stopped by Old Madam. You stay. Nanny Zhou quickly turned around and stood in front of Madame D's bed. The room was full of people from Duke Yong's mansion, and she had been pushed to the side. Yuru, Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion has confirmed that you are her granddaughter. She has sent someone to Duke Yong's mansion to ask about you, and I also did what your mother said. Last night, I specially asked someone to send a message to Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madam said in a low voice with a sullen face. This matter was of great importance. Old Madam was very careful even if she was a trusted subordinate. What does Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion mean? Qin Yuru looked at Old Madam excitedly and asked. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion means that she has no right to intervene now, and Yuru can't get out of the mansion recently, so she can't meet her. Otherwise, she can say that she likes Yuru, directly recognize Yuru as her granddaughter, and then take her away. Now we can only... Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion frowned and said, What can we do? We can only wait for the right time. There must be a chance for you to meet Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Although Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion has a good impression of you before, she didn't say that she wants to recognize you as her granddaughter. Old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion frowned more. Speaking of this matter, it was too slow. If they had acted faster, they could directly recognize Qin Yuru when they met, and then they could directly intervene in the Qin's mansion when there was something wrong. Now even if Old Madam of Duke Xing wanted to intervene, she was powerless. Qin's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion had nothing to do with each other. Qin Yuru bit her lip and felt very unwilling. Madame D was in such a state that she could not get out of the mansion, nor could she go to other mansions' banquets in the capital city. Even if she wanted to meet Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, she had no chance. Looking at Madame D's state, she didn't know when she would wake up. Would she never have a chance? Thinking of this, she felt desperate. She almost reached the top in one step, but she could only see it, but couldn't touch it. She was unwilling. At this time, she even felt regret. If she had known that Madame D's state of being neither alive nor dead would affect her, she would have either killed more quickly or not done it at that time. Yuru, this matter is not urgent. You take care of your mother for a few days. If you leave these days, what will your mother do? She only has you as her daughter. If you leave, if the people over there want to hurt her, no one will help her. Take care of your mother first and then make a plan. Of course, she meant to treat her daughter's injury first. Even if she couldn't speak in the future, at least she should be well, especially during the period of the Spring Festival. She should let Madame D take good care of her. With her daughter serving her, she would be in a good mood and get better quickly. Qin Yuru couldn't refuse even if she wanted to. She felt depressed, but she had to pretend to cry with joy and nodded repeatedly. Grandma, Yuru will listen to you. Good girl, it's good that you can think like this. When your mother gets better, I will help you plan. I will definitely find a chance for you to meet old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madam said with satisfaction. As long as my mother gets better, Yuru is willing to do anything. Qin Yuru turned to look at Madame D with tears on her face. Nanny Zhou, who stood by the bed, leaned more and more to the corner of the bed, with a little fear in her eyes. In this room, only she knew clearly what happened that day, but she didn't dare to say anything. For the first time, she felt that First Miss was too terrible. It was obviously the First Miss who wanted to kill Madame that day. No one had expected this. Today, it was also the First Miss who showed filial piety to Madame in front of old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion. When did the First Miss become so terrible? Since the matter was settled, people of Duke Yong's mansion also left. Before leaving, Nanny Huang came over in a hurry. Old Madame took her to a room on the side, talked for a while, and then left with people. First Miss, I am going to pack things for you. Madame Dowager wants you to live here and serve Madame D nearby. Even if you can't serve her personally, Madame D will get better when she sees you. Nanny Huang said to Qin Yuru respectfully. Since then, she really considered for Qin Yuru. Nanny Huang, I can only rely on you in the future. Qin Yuru sighed and said, First Miss, don't worry. I will definitely help you. Nanny Huang sighed helplessly and said, the conditions of old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion forced her to follow Qin Yuru wholeheartedly. Go and help me pack things. Qin Yuru nodded and waved her hand weakly. Nanny Huang excused herself. The room became quiet, and only Nanny Zhou's body carefully leaned on the bed again. Nanny Zhou. Qin Yuru said softly. Nanny Zhou's voice was gentle in the past, but it made Nanny Zhou tremble in fear when she heard it. She looked up at Qin Yuru with a pair of frightened eyes and said timidly, First Miss. Nanny Zhou, are you afraid of me? Qin Yuru stared at Nanny Zhou's slightly pale face and said with a smile. In Nanny Zhou's eyes, Qin Yuru's smile was like a grim smile. Nanny Zhou's lips trembled and then she said, First Miss, I dare not. Dare not? Why don't you dare? Qin Yuru said with a smile. She moved her feet and took a step forward, forcing Nanny Zhou to come closer. Nanny Zhou shrank her body again and said, First Miss, I dare not. I really didn't see anything and I don't know anything. You didn't see anything and you don't know? Qin Yuru stopped and repeated the words thoughtfully. Her cold eyes fell on Nanny Zhou's face, which made Nanny Zhou tremble with fear. First Miss, you can rest assured that I really don't know anything. Absolutely. I won't talk nonsense. Nanny Zhou heard her teeth chattering and did not dare to raise her head to look at Qin Yuru. That's the best. Qin Yuru smiled in a low voice. Her voice was gentle and clear, with the unique reservation of a miss from an aristocratic family. Nanny Zhou has served my mother with all your heart. I hope you can serve me with all your heart in the future. Yes, First Miss, rest assured. I know. Nanny Zhou said repeatedly. Ask someone to arrange a place for me to live. I will live in the second room on the right. It doesn't need to be close to my mother's room. Qin Yuru ordered. Yes, this old servant will go prepare now. Nanny Zhou almost ran away. When she got outside, she felt that her back was hot. In such a cold day, she was so scared that she broke into a cold sweat. She stood at the door and wanted to look back, but she did not dare. She gritted her teeth and waved to the two little maids in the corridor, motioning them to come over. Then she took them to clean up Qin Yuru's room. As for Madame D, she didn't have to worry about First Miss in the house. Mother, do you also wish would he trample on Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru? Then don't blame me for being ruthless. In fact, I'm not ruthless enough. Otherwise, how could I let you live? Qin Yuru looked at Madame D's pale face and muttered to herself. Madame D was still unconscious in the room. After saying that, he reached out and touched Madame D's hair. His eyes fell on Madame D's neck. There was a thick bandage wrapped around her neck. He didn't know how badly she was hurt. He lowered his hand and wanted to untie the bandage, but he didn't really untie it. The light shone in through the window and fell on Qin Yuru's face. Her smile was as bright as a flower, and it reflected Madame D's pale face. It looked so strange and chilling. "Mother, don't worry. You won't die in vain." Madame D's neurotic voice sounded cold and hollow in the room. Chapter 389. When Qin Wanru came over, Qin Yuru's things were being moved here one by one. Yulan Pavilion, which had been deserted for a long time, suddenly became lively. The servant girls and old maids who had been sent to other places also came back. The courtyard, which had been overgrown with weeds, was cleaned up again. Qin Shuer and Hongye led a group of servant girls and old maids to clean the courtyard inside and outside. Madame D originally had 2 personal servant girls, Maya and Maybao, but they were also sent away later. This time they came back again, which could be regarded as the previous principal servant girl. Qin Shuer originally came here with the title of principal servant girl. Since Hongye entered the mansion, she was also regarded as a principal servant girl. Now there were 4 more principal servant girls around Madame D, together with Nanny Zhou, several little servant girls, and rough old maids. The whole courtyard immediately became a lot more lively. Following Qin Yuru were her 2 personal principal servant girls, Mei Shui and Mei Yin. She actually had 2 personal principal servant girls, but she was used to using Mei Shui and Mei Yin, so they stayed in her Yalan pavilion. Nanny Huang also came over. Although she did not bring many people, they occupied several main rooms. "Second sister, I'm not feeling well. I have to trouble you to take care of mother." Qin Yuru looked at Qin Wanru with a pale face. She looked listless and was supported by 2 principal servant girls. There were tears between her eyes. Her eyes were red and swollen. It could be seen that she had just cried hard. "Big sister, rest assured. But I'm afraid I have to trouble you at night," Qin Wanru said with a smile. Qin Yuru pretended to be so weak, which was very different from yesterday. It seemed that she was struggling to get up. "Then I and second sister will take turns to rest. Second sister will come during the day, and I will guard at night. We have to let mother wake up," Qin Yuru said with a sad face, as if it was true. "Big sister, go to rest," Qin Wanru said calmly. After talking with Qin Wanru, Qin Yuru held the hands of 2 servant girls and went to her temporary room. She really left this matter to Qin Wanru. First Miss is Madame D's biological daughter. How can she be so at ease?" Yujia looked at Qin Yuru's back angrily and said, "She will come out," Qin Wanru said calmly and turned to walk to the main room. She walked into the main room and turned into the inner room. Madame D was lying straight on the bed without any sound. Yesterday, there was a great disturbance, so Qin Wanru did not look at Madame D. Qin Wanru did not look at all. Wanru found that Madame D was completely different from the madam in her memory. In his previous life, before he died, he had seen Madame D once from a distance. At that time, she was a noble madam who entered the palace. She was gorgeously dressed and looked young and energetic. At first glance, she was a beauty in her 30s. When she looked up and saw him, she curled up her lips coldly and sarcastically. Then she turned around and left with her maid. Wanwas and Qin Hud Wanru long ago she had not even looked at had by Wanru had Qin. Now, Madame D looked like she was in her 50s or 60s. She had white hair on her head, and her face was thin and ugly. There was also a scar on her face, which should have been left by the powder she spilled on her face the last time she wanted to disfigure herself. That medicine contained powder that would not allow scars to form. Even though it had formed a scar, it still left such a large bump that was different from the skin color. There was a white bandage tied around her neck. She lay there lifelessly as if she was not breathing. Only the slight rise and fall of the quilt on her chest showed that she was alive. Seeing Qin Wanru coming in, Nanny Zhou was stunned for a moment and suddenly stepped forward to salute. Qin Wanru sat on the chair in front of the bed and glanced at Nanny Zhou with a gentle smile. Nanny Zhou, what did the doctor say? I don't know. Nanny Zhou lowered her head and said, Nanny Zhou, you have been serving Madame D for a long time. Father didn't punish you after such a thing happened. He still keeps you by Madame D's side because of your loyalty to Madame D. However, this kind of thing can only happen once. If something happens to Madame D again, I'm afraid that Nanny Zhou will have to sacrifice herself for her. You have been serving in the mansion for a long time. You should know Father's means. Qin Wanru's eyes flickered slightly. Although her tone was gentle, the meaning in her words was absolutely not gentle. Nanny Zhou hurriedly said, Second miss, don't worry. I will protect Madam even if I die. I will not let Madam be hurt again. Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said meaningfully, No, not hurt. I made a slip of the tongue. I said I will not let Madam hurt herself again. Nanny Zhou shook her head repeatedly and explained hurriedly for fear that Qin Wanru would misunderstand. That couldn't be better. Father has always been strict with his ideas. Such a thing almost made Duke Yong's mansion and our Qin's mansion go against each other. Father has always cared about this kind of thing. Qin Wanru said leisurely. Her words sounded like a warning and a sigh. When Nanny Zhou heard it, she was so scared that she was flustered. Second miss, I know. Nothing will happen again. Did the doctor come today? What doctor? Qin Wanru asked, narrowing her eyes and paying attention to Madame D's injury. Just now old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion asked the Imperial physician from the palace to come over, but he hasn't come yet. Previously, the general also intended to ask the Imperial physician. Madame's injury is too serious. She can't speak until now. She is very dizzy. Even if she wakes up, she will fall asleep soon. Nanny Zhou said worriedly. Did he say that he will come soon? Qin Wanru smiled and asked lightly. He said that he will come soon. It should be soon. Nanny Zhou said hurriedly. Chu Lu, accompany Nanny Zhou to Chuehua Gate to wait. If the Imperial physician comes, bring him here immediately. Qin Wanru ordered Chu Lu. When she came here this time, she brought 2 servant girls. One was Chu Lu and the other was Yu Jie. Chu Lu answered and came over. She smiled at Nanny Zhou and said, Nanny Zhou, let's go. We will wait for the Imperial physician to come and bring him here directly. It will be faster. Nanny Zhou's pupils contracted. She looked at Qin Wanru and Yu Jie behind Qin Wanru in astonishment. She opened her mouth and was very flustered. If she also left, there would only be second miss and her personal servant girl left in this room. What if something happened? What? You don't want the Imperial physician to come quickly? Qin Wanru's face slightly darkened. Yu Jie snorted coldly. Nanny Zhou, if you don't bring the Imperial physician here quickly, can you bear the responsibility if something happens later? Yes, I will wait for him right now. Nanny Zhou said hurriedly. She did not dare to hesitate anymore and turned to leave with Chu Lu. She thought that second miss would not do anything to Madame at this time. If something really happened to Madame after she left, everyone would think that it was second miss who did it. After Nanny Zhou and Chu Lu left, Qin Wanru and her servant girl were left in the room. Use the medicine, Qin Wanru ordered. Yu Jie nodded and came out from behind Qin Wanru. She took out a small medicine bag from her arms, walked to the bed, squatted down, and smeared some powder near Madame D's nose. Immediately, a pungent smell rushed into Madame D's nose, which made her wake up involuntarily. She pressed her throat and coughed while looking at a figure in front of her in a daze. She reached out and seemed to want to catch the figure in front of her. But when she saw clearly that it was Yu Jie in front of her, she was stunned for a moment and couldn't remember who the servant girl in front of her was. Madame D, our second miss is here to take care of you. From now on, our second miss will serve you until your injury is healed, Yu Jie said with a smile. She reached out to wrap the powder in her hand and stuffed it into her sleeve. Seeing the bag of powder in Yu Jie's hand, Madame D suddenly woke up from her drowsiness. She immediately pushed Yu Jie away and made a ha sound in a panic, but she couldn't say a complete sentence. Madame D, I heard that you have hidden a lot of good things here. It happens that I am here to serve you. There are no outsiders, so I want to see what good things you have here. Qin Wanru walked over with a smile and her eyes fell on Madame D's face. Her delicate little face was as white as jade, which made her more and more beautiful. Madame D waved her sleeves hard, as if she wanted to drive Qin Wanru away. But at this time, she just shook her sleeves and couldn't make any big movements at all. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and returned to the previous chair and sat down indifferently. Her eyes fell on Madame D's flustered face. Seeing that Madame D turned her neck to look for something with difficulty, Qin Wanru smiled sweetly and said, "Madame D, are you looking for Big Sister?" "Actually, Big Sister is also here to serve you, but she suddenly fell ill this morning. Although she is here now, she is resting in the side room." As soon as Qin Wanru said this, a trace of sadness flashed in Madame D's eyes, and she immediately stopped moving. Did Madame D remember what happened yesterday? Big Sister is really Madame D's good daughter. She knew Madame D's mind and specially helped Madame D. She wanted to send Madame D to death. Then she framed me and my mother with Madame D's death. Seeing Madame D's action, Qin Wanru smiled. Her smile was as gentle as water, but it made Madame D's face turn pale. Her fingers trembled and pressed on the bedside, and she gasped heavily. Maybe Big Sister is also afraid to see you now, so she deliberately didn't come over. When the Imperial physician comes later, let him see whether you can be saved. I am afraid that this is not good. You can't just hang yourself. Qin Wanru looked Madame D up and down. She found that Madame D was flexible on one side, but it was difficult for her to move the other side. In addition, Madame D had been unconscious before, so her situation was very bad. "Madame D, I am afraid that because of my good Big Sister's desperate pull, although you are still alive, you have a stroke." Chapter 390. The sound of footsteps came from outside. Qin Wanru signaled to Yujie, and Yujie stepped aside. "Second Miss, Imperial Physician Li is here." Chu Li's voice came from outside. Qin Wanru stood up and hid behind the gauze curtain. Yujie walked to the door and lifted the curtain. A middle-aged Imperial physician walked in, followed by a servant carrying a medicine box. Nanny Zhou followed behind. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Madame D lying on the bed with her eyes open and motionless. She was so scared that she rushed to her and asked, Madam, what's wrong with you?" Madame D just woke up. She seemed to feel something wrong and was scared. Yujie came over and bowed to the Imperial physician respectfully. Madam, where do you feel uncomfortable? Please tell me." Nanny Zhou was so anxious that she was about to cry. Being called by her, Madame D seemed to come back to life. She turned her head with difficulty and looked at the Imperial physician who just came to the capital city. Her eyes lit up and she wanted to move over, but it was not convenient for her to move. "Nanny Zhou, help Madame D to tidy up and let the Imperial physician feel her pulse first." Yujie came forward and said softly. She and Nanny Zhou helped Madame D to lean against the bed, and then picked up a handkerchief and put it on Madame D's hand. Chu Lu moved a stool to the bed and asked the Imperial physician to sit down. Imperial physician Li sat on the stool, reached out to feel Madame D's pulse, and carefully felt it. It was very quiet in the room, and only the sound of everyone's breathing became clear. He felt the pulse with one hand. Then he switched to the other hand. Suddenly the curtain was lifted, and Qin Yuru rushed in with Mei Shui. Mother, everyone was shocked by her, and even Imperial physician Li opened his eyes and looked at her. Nanny Zhou, how is Mother? How is she? Qin Yuru came over and held her, looking anxious. Imperial physician Li coughed heavily, closed his eyes again, and quietly began to treat Madame D. Big Sister, come in first, don't disturb the Imperial physician. Qin Wanru slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Qin Yuru was afraid that people would know that she, as a daughter, did not appear by Madame D's side, so she came to show her face. Qin Yuru also came in, sat on a chair on the side, and asked eagerly, Second Sister, how is Mother? Big Sister, don't talk. Let the Imperial physician feel the pulse. Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Yuru's face was a little pale, but she knew that she could not speak at this time. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand and looked out of the tent angrily. She had long forgotten that the Imperial physician was coming, otherwise, she would not have gone to rest just now. The Imperial physicians in the palace represented more than just excellent medical skills. Moreover, she had the opportunity to see the nobles in the palace. If people knew that she did not stay by her mother's side, it would not be good to hear. It might even affect her future plans. She could not let people think that she was unfilial. Second younger sister, why didn't you tell me that the Imperial physician was here? After thinking about it, she felt unwilling and lowered her voice. Qin Wanru glanced at her and sneered in her heart. Knowing that she was worried about her reputation, she no longer pretended to be sick and came over in a hurry. Just now, 2 servant girls couldn't even help her up. At this time, when she entered the door, she rushed over alone. She really recovered fast. Big sister is not feeling well and needs to rest. I dare not to disturb you, Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Yuru's face became more and more ugly, and the handkerchief in her hand was almost crushed. I'm really not feeling well, she argued. Big sister, I know that you are not feeling well. After the Imperial physician finishes treating Madame D, I will ask him to treat you, Qin Wanru said calmly. Pretending to be sick in front of the Imperial physician? Qin Yuru immediately denied this idea and hurriedly shook her head. It's not necessary. How can we ask the Imperial physician in the palace? Since he is going to feel Madame D's pulse, he can take a look at Big Sister's body. It's not a big deal. At that time, I will ask my father to send a generous gift to the Imperial physician. Qin Wanru slightly raised her watery eyes and said softly, It's not good, forget it. Let's hear about mother's condition first. Qin Yuru laughed dryly. The so-called trick of pretending to be sick was very easy to be exposed. Moreover, it was the Imperial physician from the palace who came. His medical skills could not be doubted. If he said he was pretending, then he was pretending. Qin Wanru stopped talking and sneered coldly. Qin Yuru did not know, but she knew there was a kind of medicine that could mess up a person's pulse. When the doctor felt the pulse, he would think that the person was really sick. Do you have a person in charge at this time? Outside the tent, Imperial physician Li had finished feeling the pulse and checked Madame D's complexion and tongue coating. He also asked Nanny Zhou to untie the scarf around her neck. After checking, he raised his voice. When he came, there should be a miss in the tent. Later, another miss came, but he did not know which one was in charge. Imperial physician, how is my mother? Qin Yuru stood up and went out, looking anxious. Imperial physician Li looked her up and down and recognized that she was the one who rushed in just now. He frowned slightly and then looked at Qin Wanru, who came out with Qin Yuru. It could be seen that Qin Wanru was younger than Qin Yuru, and she did not seem to have grown up. It turned out that the one who was guarding in the room was the younger one, and the older one came when she saw him. Although Imperial physician Li treated the nobles in the palace, sometimes he was invited by aristocratic families to treat patients, so he knew a little about some things in the inner courtyard of aristocratic families. It seemed that the miss behind him was the biological daughter of this madam, and the older one who came later must not be the biological daughter. Otherwise, she would not be so careless. Is this second miss? After Imperial physician Li judged who was the new one, he naturally spoke to his biological daughter. I am. Qin Wanru answered with a smile and stepped forward. Your mother's health is not very good. Second miss, you'd better talk with me in the outer room. Imperial physician Li looked at Madame D, who was nervous on the bed, and said, Imperial physician, this is my mother. How is my mother's health? Imperial physician, please tell me. Hearing this, Qin Yuru knew that Imperial physician Li had misunderstood, and this misunderstanding made her feel ashamed and annoyed. She suppressed the annoyance in her heart and said to the Imperial physician respectfully, This is first Mrs. Biological Mother? Imperial physician Li looked at Qin Yuru and then looked at Madame D, who was lying on the bed. This is my mother, not second sisters. Imperial physician, please tell me. Qin Yuru said bluntly and bowed sideways. With her eyes slightly red, she asked again, Imperial physician, what's wrong with my mother? Is there anything wrong? Knowing that he had made a mistake, Imperial Physician Li glanced at Qin Yuru and then Qin Wanru, who was standing on the side. He knew that he had misunderstood before. After being interrupted by Qin Yuru, he forgot to say what he wanted to say outside. He coughed in a low voice and said, "Your mother's vocal cords are injured and her voice is bad. She needs to recover slowly, but this is not the most serious." "What else?" "Imperial Physician, please tell me." Qin Yuru implored anxiously. Seeing Madame D lying on the bed, Qin Wanru also became alert and looked at Imperial Physician Li nervously. "Your mother had a stroke. Although it is not very serious, I'm afraid she needs to take good care of herself. She can't be too tired, and she needs to be careful of many big mood swings. She needs to meditate and recuperate normally," Imperial Physician Li said. "Then, can she recover completely by meditating and recuperating?" Qin Yuru asked anxiously. "I'm afraid she will be the same as before. It's unlikely, but it's always good to take good care of her. Half of her body has a stroke, and it's not too serious. But it will be inconvenient for her to move her limbs in the future," Imperial Physician Li said implicitly. "If she can recuperate properly, she will be fine. She had a stroke, so she could only be in this half-dead state. It would be difficult for her to even get up." Madame D's head was buzzing, and there were only these few words in her ears. She rolled her eyes on the bed and fainted directly. How could her glory, splendor, wealth, and her road to a high position be gone? Qin Yuru was also stunned. Madame D actually had a stroke, and she seemed to be in a bad state. Did this mean that she had to stay by the bed all the time? What should she do? "Imperial Physician, Madame D has fainted, please help to take a look," only Qin Wanru said to Imperial Physician Li calmly. Imperial Physician Li took Madame D's pulse again, and then turned to Qin Yuru and said, "First, miss, your mother has suffered a great blow, and I hope you can help her understand. If she can't get over it, her health will get worse and worse. Now that she is in this state, you just need to take good care of her. Don't worry too much, just follow your heart and be indifferent to everything." Qin Yuru stared blankly at Madame D, who was lying on the bed, and didn't hear what Imperial Physician Li said at all. There was only one sentence in her ears now, which was that her mother would be in this half-dead state forever. As her daughter, she could only serve her mother by the bed from then on. She could only spend her time here, and it was inconvenient for her to attend some banquets between misses. She had just arrived in the capital city, and her favorite thing was to attend various banquets between misses from aristocratic families. In the future, she would not have the chance to wear beautiful clothes to attend banquets. "Imperial Physician Li, please tell Nanny Zhou what we should pay attention to in this aspect." Qin Wanru reminded Imperial Physician Li softly. Yes, just tell me." At this time, Nanny Zhou also woke up from the shock and said while wiping away her tears. Imperial Physician Li looked at Qin Yuru, who was shocked but not sad, and then looked at Qin Wanru, who was handling affairs calmly. His eyes became a little darker. It seemed that this biological daughter did not care so much about her mother. At this time, she was shocked because she cared about other things. Thinking of the fact that when he first came here, it was not his biological daughter who stayed by the bed. It seemed that this first miss had no feelings for her mother, and even was not as good as this second Mississippi. Although she was not her biological daughter, at least she could handle affairs calmly. He shook his head secretly. Not only was she not filial to her mother, but she was also not a person who could handle affairs. If she did not pull him to talk just now, he would not talk about her condition in front of the patient, and she would be so scared that she fainted. Chapter 391. The Imperial Physician shook his head at Qin Yuru silently and followed Yu Jie out of the door of the main room with his servant. When he was about to go to the wing room to get a prescription, he saw that the curtain was suddenly lifted from the inside. Qin Yuru rushed out and cried to Imperial Physician Li, "Imperial Physician, please save my mother." Her cry was extremely sorrowful. If Dr. Li didn't have the previous experience, he would also think that Qin Yuru was a very filial young lady who was sincere to her mother. However, with the experience just now, no matter how sincere Qin Yuru was at this time, Dr. Li couldn't help but feel that she was too fake. The first impression had been formed and it was difficult to change. First miss, please be at ease. Madam's illness is still the priority. Let her feel better and she will get better soon. Maybe there is still a possibility. Dr. Li said with a gentle look and then turned back into the wing room. Qin Yuru stood in the corridor with cold hands and feet. She only felt that her blood and qi were cold all over. Things were beyond her expectation. Madame D did not die, but she had symptoms of a stroke. What should she do in the future? She didn't want to waste time with Madame D. It was her mother who wanted to harm Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru. It had nothing to do with her. Why should she bear the consequences? But that was her mother. That was her biological mother. Tears rolled down Qin Yuru's cheeks one by one. This time, her tears were sincere. If she had known that she was in a half-dead state, she would have been merciless at that time. Anyway, she was too young to marry Di Yan now. Even if she had to observe the mourning period, it would not be a big deal. If her mother died, she could use the power of her maternal grandmother to make Shui Ruolin and Qin Wanru die without a burial place. This could be regarded as her mother's soul in heaven. Her mother would definitely not blame her. But what should she do now? For a moment, Qin Yuru was panic-stricken and didn't know what to do. Nanny Huang came from outside the courtyard and saw Qin Yuru standing in the corridor with a panic-stricken face. There were still traces of tears on her face. It could be seen that she really cried just now. Nanny Huang couldn't help feeling a little pity in her heart. Although First Miss had some bad conduct before, she was still filial to her mother. Eldest Miss, where is Imperial Physician Li? She came forward and asked softly. Nanny Huang, what should we do? Mother has a stroke. She said, she can't get up in the future like a normal person. Qin Yuru grabbed Nanny Huang's hand and said anxiously. First Miss, don't worry. Madam will get better. Nanny Huang gently patted Qin Yuru's hand and comforted her. She won't get better. She won't get better. The Imperial physician said it's impossible for her to get better. Qin Yuru said painfully, and her tears fell again. She really didn't want to be tied to her mother's side. Other than the hospital bed, there was only a cold room. First Miss, there are exceptions to everything. Maybe Madam will get better. Don't worry. The general has come back and asked the Imperial physician to come over. Nanny Huang sighed and her voice became more gentle. Qin Huayong had just returned. Hearing that the Imperial physician was coming, he planned to let the Imperial physician go over and ask about Madame D's injury in person. Perhaps the word general that Nanny Huang mentioned made Qin Yuru sober. She calmed down and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Then she said to Nanny Huang in low spirits, Nanny, the Imperial physician is in the wing room giving a prescription. First Miss, please go to Madam's room and sit for a while. I will accompany you later. Nanny Huang pointed to Madame D's room and said when she saw that she was out of her wits. Qin Yuru couldn't help but shiver. Instead of moving forward, she took a step back. The curtained door of Madame D's room gave her an indescribable sense of oppression. She felt that she couldn't even breathe after entering that room. First Miss, what's wrong with you? Nanny Huang asked in confusion. Nothing. You can go. Qin Yuru sobered up and shook her head with a pale face. Nanny Huang saw that her face was too pale and her expression was too sad. There was nothing else. She thought that she was just shocked by Madame D's health, so she didn't say anything more and went to the wing room to pass the message. When she came out of the wing room, she found that Qin Yuru had already entered the main room. She didn't take it seriously and led the Imperial physician to see Qin Huayong. When Qin Yuru entered the room, she saw Qin Wanru sitting on the chair in front of Madame D's dressing table. She was casually looking through the jewelry on Madame D's dressing table and talking to Yu Jie with interest from time to time. Occasionally, she would also gesture in the mirror. Nanny Zhou stood in front of the bed and frowned. It was obvious that she didn't like Qin Wanru's behavior, but she didn't dare to step forward to reprimand her. The current Qin Wanru was not the Qin Wanru of the past. Seeing Qin Yuru come in, Nanny Zhou's eyes lit up. She hurriedly stepped forward and called out, First Miss. Then she glanced at Qin Wanru, who was sitting in front of the dressing table, and signaled her to speak. Unfortunately, Qin Yuru didn't notice her hint at all. At this moment, her mind was filled with the thought that if Madame D was sick, it would be inconvenient for her to appear in front of others. Otherwise, others would say that her biological mother was seriously ill, and yet she still had the mood to go out to enjoy the banquet. Seeing that Qin Yuru didn't respond to her, Nanny Zhou just sat on another chair with a frown and stared at Madame D in a daze. Inexplicably, Nanny Zhou couldn't help calling out in a low voice, "First Miss." "What's the matter?" Qin Yuru was in deep thought. After being interrupted, she raised her head and said impatiently, "First Miss, Madam has fainted." Nanny Zhou said, "Didn't the Imperial physician say that she was fine and would wake up soon?" Qin Yuru coldly interrupted her words. Qin Yuru's words made Nanny Zhou speechless. Madame D on the bed seemed to wake up and made some sounds. Nanny Zhou hurriedly stepped forward and said in a low voice, Madam, are you awake?" Madame D opened her eyes and turned her gaze from Nanny Zhou's face to Qin Yuru with difficulty. She waved at Qin Yuru. "First Miss, Madame asked you to come over," Nanny Zhou said in a low voice as soon as Madame D woke up. Qin Yuru lowered her head, stood up and walked to the bed. She didn't dare to look at Madame D's eyes. She always felt that there was something in those eyes, which made her inexplicably palpitate. Madame D chuckled again and clapped her hands down hard. Nanny Zhou had been with Madame D for a long time, so she immediately understood what she meant. She hurriedly said to Qin Yuru, "First Miss, Madame asked you to squat down. She can't reach you." Qin Yuru squatted down and slightly raised her eyes to look at Madame D. Suddenly, she saw a trace of hatred in Madame D's eyes. She subconsciously stepped back, but Madame D's hand had already slapped her hard on the face. A slap was not very painful. Madame D's hand was very weak now, but when Qin Yuru stepped back, she accidentally sat on the ground. "Mother, you actually slapped me?" Qin Yuru covered her face in disbelief. Her eyes were red. She had never been slapped by Madame D in her life, not to mention in front of Qin Wanru. Madame D gasped hard. Her eyes were almost burning. She looked at Qin Yuru with hatred, and her throat made a deeper sound, but she couldn't say anything. Madam, don't be angry. Let's talk this out. This is First Miss. Nanny Zhou was also stunned for a moment. At this time, she reacted and hurriedly reached out to grab Madame D's hand. Madame D freed herself from Nanny Zhou's grip and pointed at Qin Yuru fiercely. Although she didn't say anything, Qin Yuru knew that her mother knew that she wanted to kill Qin Yuru yesterday. Qin Yuru knew that her mother knew that she wanted to kill Qin Yuru yesterday. At this moment, she was ashamed, angry, hateful, and regretful. She reached out to cover her face, stood up and ran away in tears. She didn't know how to face Madame D now. Seeing Qin Yuru run away in tears, Madame D was angry and hateful. She was still angry and slapped Nanny Zhou's face hard. Then she turned her fierce eyes to the others in the room. At this time, she realized that there was another person in the room, and it was a person who made her angry. Qin Wanru, who was sitting in front of her dressing table and playing with her jewelry, was Qin Wanru. Madame D stared at Qin Wanru with hatred. If looks could kill, Qin Wanru would have been cut into pieces by now. Qin Wanru was not surprised by Madame D's vicious expression. Even if Madame D was angry with Qin Yuru, she would definitely vent her anger on Qin Wanru and her mother. People like Madame D and Qin Yuru would never find fault with themselves. They always thought that their bad situation was caused by others. Or perhaps they subconsciously felt that even if they failed to harm others and were harmed instead, it was still someone else's fault. Why couldn't others just stand there and let them kill them and make them suffer? Qin Wanru smiled and put a string of beads around her neck. She stood up and walked to the bed. She smiled elegantly and leisurely. "Madame D is awake? That's great. Just now the Imperial physician said that she needs to recuperate in the future. Then I will take care of Madame D. It's okay for me to look through everything in this room, right?" Qin Wanru said with a smile. She reached out and gently touched her hand. Only then did Madame D see that Qin Wanru was wearing a huge ruby ring on her hand. It was the ruby ring that she liked the most. For a moment, Madame D was angry and hateful. She made a sound. Madame D, you agree, right? Thank you, Madame D. I heard that Madame D has a lot of good things at this time. Anyway, I have nothing to do with Madame D, so I will look through them. Qin Wanru deliberately misinterpreted her meaning. She tilted her head and looked at the box on the side with a little coquettishness. Her smile became more and more shallow, as if she found something interesting. Madame D shook Nanny Zhou's hand hard, pointed at Qin Wanru and shook her own hand with hatred. Chapter 392. Nanny Zhou, I'm here to serve your madam, said Qin Wanru with a smile. Qin Wanru smiled and turned her wrist indifferently. Madame D couldn't help but look at her wrist. She was furious when she saw it. She reached out to touch Qin Wanru's hand, but it was too far away and she couldn't reach it at all. Madam also likes this pair of bracelets? I like them very much. Madam, please give them to me. I happen to be serving Madam here, so I can build a good relationship with you. Qin Wanru raised the bracelets in her hand and smiled. Then she went back to the dressing table, pulled the drawer, took out a piece of paper and looked at it casually. Is this the list of Madam's dowry? Madame D's face changed and she pushed Nanny Zhou hard. Nanny Zhou hurried forward and begged Qin Wanru with a smile. Second miss, you can't touch these. Why not? I just want to look. Qin Wanru tilted her head and said in confusion. These are Madam's private property. Even the general can't know it. Nanny Zhou braced herself to explain. Even father can't know it? But now Madame D is so injured. It's okay for me to look at it when I am here to serve her. Qin Wanru looked around curiously. I haven't been able to look at Madam's room as I like. She was going to turn Madame D's room upside down. Madame D was furious. If she could move freely now, she would definitely rush to slap Qin Wanru. How could she let this bastard go through her things? Madame D patted the bed heavily. She was so angry that she couldn't do anything to Qin Wanru. She patted the edge of the bed hard again. Nanny Zhou turned around in a hurry. Madame D's eyes turned to the window where there were some paper and inkstone. Nanny Zhou immediately understood. She hurriedly took a piece of paper and a pen. Madame D picked up the pen with difficulty and only wrote a few words. Go. Madame D wants me to go? That won't do. I was ordered by my grandmother to take care of you. You're injured to this extent, so you need a junior to take care of you. But big sister is sick and said that she can't take care of you. I'm the only one left in the mansion. Qin Wanru said helplessly, but her beautiful eyes were full of smiles, without any reluctance of being forced to come here. Looking at the smile on Qin Wanru's face and the jewelry on her head and body, Mrs. Qin was so angry that she almost fainted again. She did not want Qin Wanru to accompany her, she did not want Qin Wanru to look into her room, and she did not want Qin Wanru to wear her jewelry. I want Yuru. She picked up the brush with difficulty and said. Qin Wanru blinked her big eyes and said, but big sister is sick. Madame D, you beat her just now, and big sister was beaten away. Leave, I don't want you. After finishing her words, Madame D patted her bed so hard that the ink stained her hands on the bed. She glared at Qin Wanru as if she was going to eat her alive. When the curtain was lifted, Qin Huaiyong walked in and saw this scene. The little girl stood innocently and seemed to be at a loss. On the bed, Madame D glared at her fiercely. On the edge of the bed, the quilt was full of ink stains, making it very dirty. What's going on? Qin Huaiyong said coldly and reached out to rub his forehead. Just now, Imperial physician Li also said that Madame D's health condition might not recover. Even if she was like this, she had to take care of herself peacefully. But when she just took care of herself, she became so noisy here. Since yesterday, he had not had a good rest because of the matter of Prince Cheng. At this time, he also looked gloomy. Seeing Madame D's stiff and scarred face, he felt more and more depressed. Others might not know the cause of the matter, but how could he not know? Madame D was not a good person, and even her daughter was led astray by her. Thinking of what he asked yesterday, he was almost thunderstruck. How could his daughter be such a vicious person? It must be Madame D's scheme again. If Madame D did not have an accident now, Qin Huaiyong would never let her stay in the mansion. General, Madame doesn't want second miss to serve here. Seeing Qin Huaiyong coming, Nanny Zhou hurried to greet him and then whispered after seeing Madame D's reaction. Where is first miss? Qin Huaiyong looked around and didn't find Qin Yuru. His face became more and more gloomy. His biological mother was like this. Where did Qin Yuru go? Why didn't she stay by Madame D's side? Big sister was beaten by Madame D just now. Qin Wanru hesitated for a moment, but still told the truth. Qin Huaiyong beat his eldest daughter away and then quarreled with his youngest daughter. The blue veins on his forehead couldn't help jumping, and he couldn't hide the disgust in his eyes. He waved to Qin Wanru and said, Wanru, go back. Since she doesn't want you to serve here, don't serve her. Father, this is not good, is it? Someone has to serve Madame D. Otherwise, what will others think of our mansion? Grandma said that Duke Yong's mansion can't explain it. Qin Wanru explained helplessly. Go back first. I will talk to your grandma and Duke Yong's mansion first. Qin Huaiyong waved his hand and said. Since it was Qin Huaiyong's idea, Qin Wanru naturally couldn't object. She walked to the bed and said softly to Madame D, Madame D, I will go back first. If you need anything in the future, just ask Big Sister to send someone to tell me. I will go back now. After saying that, she bowed sideways and turned to leave. But there came a violent hee-hee sound of Madame D behind her. Qin Wanru looked back with a blank face. She didn't know what Madame D was trying to say. Madame D stretched out one hand as if she wanted to hold Qin Wanru. Her face was ferocious and twisted, which made Qin Huaiyong feel nauseous. He increasingly felt that he should not come here in the future. Madame D looked not only ugly but also ferocious. What does she want? Qin Huaiyong looked at Nanny Zhou impatiently and asked. Hearing Qin Huaiyong's question, Nanny Zhou had to lower her head and said dryly, Madam. Madam means that second miss is still wearing your jewelry and needs to take it off before leaving. With a bang, Qin Huaiyong's hand slammed on the table so hard that the corner of the table caved in. Qin Huaiyong's face was livid and he said to Madame D harshly, At this time, you still care about these worldly possessions. Don't worry. If you die like this, I will bury these things with you, so that you won't feel worried. His words were filled with anger and extreme disgust, which fell into Madame D's ears without any disguise. Madame D struggled painfully for a while, and the blue veins on her forehead also stood out. She was still, hee-hee, sound coming from her throat, but she couldn't say anything. She could only slap the edge of the bed hard. There was ink on the edge of the bed, and now it was even more messy. The bed, clothes, and quilt were all stained with ink, looking very dirty. Father, don't be angry. Wanru is not sensible. Just now, I saw some jewelry on the dressing table, so I took it and put it on. I'll put it back right away. At this time, Qin Wanru seemed to come to her senses and said hurriedly. She retreated to the dressing table, and Yujia hurried to take off the jewelry for her. Both the master and servant were trembling with fear, and it was obvious that they were scared by Madame D. After taking off the jewelry, Qin Wanru put it on the dressing table and then bowed to Qin Huaiyong respectfully. Then she left with Yujia in a hurry, as if there was some evil spirit chasing behind them. Seeing that Madame D drove Qin Wanru away, and there were no outsiders in the room, Qin Huaiyong sneered and said, Madame D, you know what you have done best. You reap what you sow. You want to hurt others, but you hurt yourself. At this time, you still dare to despise Wanru, and even care about your belongings. Someone like you will get into trouble. His words were ruthless, and Madame D's face turned blue and white, and she made a painful hee-hee sound in her throat. Let Yuru accompany you in the future, and Wanru doesn't need to come here. Anyway, you don't treat her as a junior. She is only 11 years old, a child, and you can't tolerate her. Since you want to focus on recuperation now, she'd better not come, lest you are cruel and deliberately torture her. At that time, not only her, but also you will be in trouble. Qin Huaiyong stood up and said with a cold face. Madame D let out a painful scream and seemed to want to say something. However, they were now like chickens talking to ducks, and Qin Huaiyong didn't understand her at all, nor did he want to understand her. After glancing at her coldly, he turned around and left without looking back. Nanny Zhou wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't dare to say anything. She could only watch Qin Huaiyong stride out of the door of the main room, and Madame D's more suppressed cry of pain came from behind, and it seemed that it was more than a hee-hee sound. Qin Huaiyong only felt sick and uncomfortable from the bottom of his heart towards this hee-hee sound that seemed to be laughing yet not laughing, crying yet not crying. It was as if he had eaten something dirty that he couldn't swallow or spit out. It was extremely uncomfortable. And the atmosphere in Madame D's room also made him a little uncomfortable, as if the whole room was gloomy and cold, and it was suffocating. Father, why are you here? When he just walked out of the door, Qin Yuru suddenly rushed in front of him and said with surprise. She heard that Qin Huaiyong came, so she came again. Qin Huaiyong's eyes fell on Qin Yuru's slightly red and swollen face, and his eyes were deep. He pursed his lips, and after a long time, when Qin Yuru was stared at and lowered her head, he said slowly, I heard that you are not in good health? A little bit sick. Qin Yuru lowered her head. Since you are just a little sick, you will take care of your mother from now on. Qin Huaiyong said slowly, and his eyes narrowed, showing a bit of coldness that he didn't usually have. Isn't there still second sister? Qin Yuru trembled under his gaze and said anxiously. She was driven away by your mother. Qin Huaiyong said coldly. Chapter 393. Your mother drove Wanru away. You have to be more careful in the future. Don't let your mother be too tired. She is your biological mother. Although she is not good to others, she has never been bad to you. Qin Huaiyong said coldly. After that, he did not explain more and turned to leave. No, father, how can this be? Qin Yuru's sorrowful voice came from behind, with a little anger that had not been there before. Qin Huaiyong acted as if he didn't hear anything and continued to walk forward. After returning from Madame D's Yulon Pavilion, Qin Wanru went back to Xinning Pavilion first. Surprisingly, Shui Rulin was there. Seeing Qin Wanru coming back, Shui Rulin immediately looked her up and down and felt relieved when she found that Qin Wanru was fine. After asking her to sit down and asking a maid to serve tea, she asked softly, Wanru, what's the matter? Nothing. Father asked me to come back, saying that Madame D will be taken care of by big sister. Qin Wanru said with a smile, picked up the teacup at hand and took a sip. Isn't your eldest sister sick? Old grandma asked in surprise. I was very sick before. When I went there, I needed 2 servant girls to support me. Now I'm much better. Basically, I don't need to be supported anymore. Qin Wanru said with a smile. These words were very meaningful. Madame Dowager thought about it and her expression became gloomy. She sighed softly and said, that is her biological mother. Now that she is injured like this, don't you want to take care of her? Old grandma just thought that Qin Yuru didn't want to take care of Madame D, but she didn't know that there were many other reasons behind it. This may be because Madame D's injury was too sudden. Qin Wanru said vaguely. Since her father did not tell Madame Dowager and Shui Rulin, it was inconvenient for her to say more. Yuru is getting more and more. Old grandma did not believe what she said. She knew Qin Yuru's selfish and heartless character very well. She knew that Qin Yuru must be unwilling to serve Madame D, which was why she made so many troubles. Old grandma did not think this way at first because she thought that Qin Yuru would not do such things even if she was wrong. Now thinking about her character, she would really do that. In fact, she learned this from Madame D. Madame D reaped what she sowed. What did the Imperial physicians say? The old mistress sighed and changed the topic. She didn't want to care about the matter between the mother and daughter anymore. She must have strained the vocal cord in her neck. She may not be able to speak in the future. But that's not the worst part. Madame D has a slight stroke. She may not be able to move half of her body. In the future, she not only needs someone to take care of her, but also needs to take good care of her. Remember not to get emotional. Qin Wanru sorted out the imperial physician's words and said, Madame Dowager and Shui Rulin looked at each other in astonishment. Neither of them had thought that it would be so serious. Would it mean that he would not be able to take care of himself in the future and might not even be able to speak? Is that what the imperial physician said? Old Grandma asked in disbelief. Yes, my father should have known it, so he specially went to Madame D's yard to have a look. He happened to see Madame D throwing a tantrum, so he asked me to come back. Qin Wanru said. Even though Madame D had done so many abominable things before, she deserved what she had done now. After knowing that she had fallen into such a situation, Qin Huaiyong would definitely go to have a look. This was also an important reason why Qin Wanru deliberately irritated Madame D. In the current situation, Madame D definitely needed someone to take care of her for a long time. Although it didn't mean that a daughter must do everything by herself, she must take more care of her. She would not attend the banquets outside if possible. This made Qin Yuru, who wanted to show off in front of others and wanted to meet old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion as soon as possible to acknowledge her, unable to bear it. Qin Wanru had never thought of serving Madame D by her side. Madame D's situation was not very good at first glance. Even if she didn't feel Madame D's pulse, she knew that she should take good care of her. Madame D became like this because of Qin Yuru, so she couldn't take good care of her. If Qin Wanru took good care of her, no one would say good things about her. But if she took bad care of Madame D, the trouble would inevitably be blamed on her. Moreover, she was not a saint. How could she repay kindness with kindness? Evil people would be tortured by evil people. But she had to go. Duke Yong's mansion would make trouble, and Madame D would also make trouble. But just now, Madame D looked at her with eyes that almost dripped venom, and she knew that Madame D blamed the trouble on her and her mother. Things just happened, and Madame D didn't want to torture her for the time being. But after a period of time, Madame D would definitely ask her to take care of Madame D, and then find ways to torture her. With her current body, it was extremely easy for her to pretend to be unconscious or unconscious. Qin Wanru didn't want to get involved in this kind of thing, so it was better to take action immediately and show that she would take care of Madame D. Now it was not that she didn't want to take care of Madame D, but that Madame D didn't want her. Then, even if Duke Yong's mansion said something, it had nothing to do with her. She believed that her father would definitely explain to Duke Yong's mansion. She took a step back in order to advance. She had nothing to do with Madame D. Next, she only needed to pay attention to Yulan Pavilion. The mother and daughter couldn't stay calm. Mother, since my sister doesn't want Wanru to go, then let it go. Otherwise, she will definitely come up with some new vicious methods. Shui Rulin looked at Madame Dowager and said. Just now, she heard that Qin Wanru went to Madame D's place, and she was very worried, so she hurried to find Madame Dowager. But Madame Dowager couldn't do anything about it. Originally, Shui Rulin wanted to find a reason to call Qin Wanru back in a few days, or she could find it from herself. Now that Qin Wanru came back, it was the best. Wanru's thing is like this. She didn't want to take care of Madame D, so she can't blame others. Yuru is still there to take care of her. In the future, if there is anything, just ask Yulan Pavilion first. She is always like this. Madame Dowager sighed again. No one expected that Madame D would make such a mess. Although Madame Dowager didn't like Madame D, she didn't expect that one day she would fall into such a situation. Mother, don't worry. If there is anything good, I will send it to her first. Shui Rulin nodded and said. They all understood the meaning of her words. Although Madame D's current situation was caused by herself, they still had to prevent Duke Yong's mansion from finding fault with her. The best way was, of course, to serve Madame D and show that they treated her very well. Anyway, Madame D couldn't recover from her half-dead appearance. Everyone knew how to look good. Grandma, now that Big Sister has moved to Madame D's side, let Big Sister decide what she needs and what she lacks in the future. If Big Sister needs anything, we can also prepare it for her. If she wants something to eat or use, We can also let big sister tell us. There is a good old maid in the kitchen, and we can also give her to Madame D. Qin Wanru thought for a while and suddenly rolled her watery eyes. She couldn't figure out the role of the suspicious old maid at the moment, so she would first send her back to Madame D's subordinates. She would see how Madame D would react when she found that the subordinate she sent out had come back. She should also be anxious. Okay, that's good. Let the old maid go to the kitchen and put it in Madame D's small kitchen. Madame Dowager nodded and agreed. Mother, do we need to invite other doctors to have a look? Maybe there are other ways to cure Madame D? Shui Rulin was concerned about another aspect, frowned and said, The imperial physician in the palace has said so. If we invite other doctors, will it make the imperial physician unhappy? Madame Dowager still had concerns. Everyone knew that it was difficult to invite the imperial physician in the palace. This time, it was Duke Yong's mansion that invited Dr. Li. If they invited other doctors to have a look, would Dr. Li think that Qin's mansion doubted his authority? Qin's mansion just arrived in the capital city, so they didn't know many things. Madame Dowager had also left the capital city for so many years, so she didn't know whether there was such a taboo in the capital city. Grandma, no matter whether Dr. Li will be unhappy or not, we have to invite other doctors to have a look. Madame D's current situation, if we don't cure her as soon as possible, I'm afraid that she will really be like this forever. If there are doctors in the future, why didn't they invite other doctors to treat her as soon as possible? This matter may fall on our mansion again. Qin Wanru analyzed. What she said was exactly in line with the thoughts of those people in Duke Yong's mansion. But this time, so many people came here, and it seemed that they were going to denounce Qin's mansion. If Qin Wanru didn't say resolutely that Prince, you could testify this matter, Qin's mansion would definitely be turned upside down at this time. Originally, they came here with a bad intention today. Mother, let's invite other doctors. If someone can cure her, our mansion will definitely give a big reward. Shui Rulin also nodded and agreed with Qin Wanru's words. No matter whether they could save Madame D or not, Qin's mansion must be sincere and try their best to cure Madame D. Okay, I will ask Nanny Duan to talk to your father later and let him decide. Madame Dowager nodded, but she still had some concerns, so she simply pushed the matter to Qin Huayong. After all, Qin Huayong was a man and knew the situation outside. Those things were beneficial to Qin's mansion and him, so they should do as he said. After discussing this matter, Qin Wanru talked with them for a while and then left with Shui Rulin. When they arrived at the door, Shui Rulin looked at Qin Wanru and seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Mother, do you have something to say to me? Qin Wanru looked at Shui Rulin and knew that she had something to say, so she asked with a smile. Wanru, I do have something to ask you. Shui Rulin said and turned to the garden, followed by Qin Wanru. Seeing that Qin Wanru followed, Shui Rulin thought for a while and said, Wanru, what do you think of young Master Qi Tianyu? What do you think? Qin Wanru raised her head in astonishment, looked at Shui Rulin with confusion and said, Mother, what do you mean by asking this? Your father said that Qi Tianyu's writing is excellent and has been recognized by the great scholars in the capital city. He is also very famous among the scholars who will take the exam. Many people expect that he will definitely pass the exam. And now he is also appreciated by Duke Xing. It is said that on the one hand, it is because of Qi Rongji, on the other hand, it is because of himself. Your father thinks that he will have a bright future. Although it sounded like a happy event, Shui Rulin frowned tightly and looked at Qin Wanru with hesitation. She was a woman and didn't think this was the most important thing. If she hated it, it was useless even if he had a bright future. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.